Hello, my name is Dylan and this is the Truth Speaks Network. Today's topic will be debating with my friend Chris about 9/11. I'm joined by, like I stated, my friend Chris and my my guest from last show, Chuck. You get Are you guys with me?
Oh, I'm with you.
Okay.
Right here.
Alright, so with that said, Chris, you said you wanted to open it up.
Yeah, I wanted to open it up by saying what most people would tell you if you
Hello,
ask what
my
happened.
name is Dylan and this is the Truth Speaks Network.
Somebody pause the
We'll
broadcast.
be debating with my friend Chris about 9/11. I'm joined by,
Okay. Who
like
is
I
that?
stated, my friend Chris. And
That's me.
I don't have it open.
Oh, I'm so sorry. All right, Chris, continue.
Alright, that was odd, I suppose. Alright, so how I wanted to start it was talk about what you would hear from somebody if you were to just ask somebody on the street what you think happened, or what you would hear from a documentary. Uh, a thing that you would hear most likely would be that the planes were hijacked by members of the Al Qaeda group, and at first, after the incident, Osama denied any involvement, but then later he admitted in 2004 that he was the cause. So that was actually shortly before the next presidential elections when he admitted it.
it's an interesting time.
There's a lot of talk about maybe it could have been the government wanting to have war over in the Middle East for oil. Like, could the U.S. president and Osama could have been working together at that point? Maybe not working together, but at least made a plan together.
Or in collaboration after the fact.
So was this actually planned?
Yes.
But
Well,
go ahead.
all right. Well, here's the thing. First of all, there's a couple of assertions in what you're saying which are difficult to quantify immediately. The problems with it are this: the admissions of Bin Laden's, the supposed admissions afterwards, are sketchy at best, and I'll tell you why. They're based on translations which have been argued about and videotapes which have been supposedly authenticated. And I urge anyone who believes that Bin Laden made admissions and everything else to seriously study the linguistic problems with these admissions. Okay, I am not an Arab speaker. I am not an expert on this. However, I do know that individuals that are knowledgeable on this do not necessarily agree. The mainstream narrative is that he did admit to it, and the mainstream narrative about the denials came through the Taliban government and came through various mainstream media assets who also had no knowledge of the Arab language. So those are problems right there. Now, to study the assertion that the U.S. government was in collaboration with bin Laden and all that, that is part of the public record at certain points in history. You have to go back beyond 9/11, though, and understand that our intelligence agencies were supporting the freedom fighters, the supposed freedom fighters in Afghanistan, during the time that the Afghani regime was engaged in warfare with the Soviet Union. So at that time, the idea was that we supported the enemy of our enemy. This is the public narrative again. It is not as clear cut as that necessarily, because all of these things become extremely nebulous when you're dealing with intelligence agencies. But the fact that we were supporting bin Laden and his freedom fighting operations in the deserts in Afghanistan are unquestionable. They're admitted by our government.
Chuck, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Ronald Reagan help Osama fund and form Al Qaeda?
Well, this is a matter of again of some debate. Al Qaeda per se is an odd issue in and of itself, because the construct of that particular organization is, again, not a simple thing. It's not like they applied for paperwork and decided to become the Al Qaeda company. Okay, it's not like it's a registered trademark and therefore we can trace it back to its copywritten roots. It is something that came together as a result of various fundamentalist organizations. Now, the Reagan administration was involved in funding, supporting, and in many ways backing, both publicly and covertly, various freedom-fighting operations throughout the globe. You have no further to look than the Iran-Contra affair to understand just some sliver of what was going on regarding these organizations and the clandestine support that came from our government at that time. Now, it's true that bin Laden was part of that. But the bin Laden nexus of connections is much larger. So I don't want to definitively say that that's an absolute fact, but the evidence for it is there.
All right. So to get into the actual event, Chris, is there anything you wanted to say before we begin debating on it?
Not much other than what I said before, how the event, you would be told that it was by Al Qaeda. We just covered a couple, I guess, conspiracy or different theories of which group could have really done it, but no, there's not really anything that we can get into. We should just get into the story and just talk about how it happened and then pick that apart.
Okay, well, before we start on the two buildings that are public, I wanted to talk about the third, that most people will say, when you ask anyone, virtually anyone on the street, they will say 2 buildings fell. That's not true. 3 did. And Chuck, is there anything you want to add on the third?
Well, realistically, let's begin the story where it begins, okay? The first thing that happened is one of the World Trade Towers was struck by something and was ablaze. Okay, very shortly thereafter, I think it's about 38 minutes later, another tower was struck. We then have the story of the Pentagon being struck, so don't forget there was a partial collapse of the Pentagon as well.
That's true, I forgot about that.
This all happens on the same day. Now, during this event and after the collapse of at least one of the Trade Center towers, we then are told by the mainstream media, of course, that another building is definitely in danger of collapse, and there's a whole story regarding that, and that would be the Building 7 event. And this building is absolutely under no one's theory, having been struck by anything that was flying in the air that day, also collapsed.
Hey, I'm sorry, I have to mute for a moment. I have something going on in my background that I need to stop. I apologize. I forgot it was there.
No problem. But you know, to put it in context again, you have the 3 buildings in New York City, you have the 1 building in Washington, D.C., and then you have a plane crash in a field near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
It'll be a quick break because when I mute, no one else will be able to be heard. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I guess we're all going to be down for a minute.
30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Dad! Dad! Dad!
All right, you did bring up some good points, though.
I'm trying to fill in the blanks a little bit, you know, because it's not fair to discuss it without putting it in context, you know.
Good, Nolan.
Can you shut off my TV?
Yep, be right there, boss.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Sorry, Dad. I know you were just in here. Okay. See ya. Guys, we're back. I'm sorry.
Okay, not a problem.
Commercial break.
Commercial break. Fill it in.
Yeah.
Play your own commercial. There you go. Fun game at home. Here's the thing. The three structures that I was talking about in New York City, and like I said, you have the plane crash, which also occurred in a field in Pennsylvania, and I don't even wish to get into that really as part of the debate because I don't know enough about it, and I don't know anyone who does know enough about it to legitimately be able to discuss the facts. But here are some facts. There were three buildings which did completely fail and collapse in New York City, and there was the partial collapse of the Pentagon in Washington. Now, the three buildings which collapsed in New York City for the first time in history, three steel-framed buildings which were constructed in this manner, absolutely failed and fully collapsed due to fires, according to the official explanation. This never occurred before nor since, regardless of the intensity of the fires, regardless of the the building construction as it stood, etc., etc. And three of these buildings in one complex fell on the same day. Even if one assumes that that jet plane fuel could cause the structural integrity to weaken enough in these large twin tower buildings to cause the collapse, which I'm not even stating that I believe that, but let's just assume for a moment that that's true. The absolute collapse and failure of Building 7 later in the day, after residual fires formed in the building, according to the official explanation, is one of the most ludicrous parts of the entire story. So I'm glad that you bring up Building 7, because most people, as you said, on the street don't even remember that a third, fairly substantial steel-framed, cement-reinforced structure also collapsed and failed on that day.
The interesting part about that one, and you're right, it's completely ludicrous, but let's also be fair about another point. Just to continue our point, it collapsed into its own footprint in 7 seconds.
Well, right. Now, from a completely scientific standpoint, there is a misnomer out there, and I will not support the idea that it collapsed at free fall speed. There is a reason for that. Mathematically speaking, it collapsed at about, and this is an approximation on my part because I didn't personally do the calculations, but I have compared the calculations from more than one structural engineer. The idea that it collapsed at free fall speed is incorrect. It collapsed at not nearly free fall speed either. And here's what I'm going to tell you. It collapsed at approximately 66% of the speed that free fall would have made it collapse. Now, if I told you that, I nearly got $100, but I only got $66, you would say that I was really exaggerating. So I really hope that people don't continue to use that exaggerated fact. However, the fact that the thing collapsed in the first place is a problem, okay? Because structurally, these things were designed to withstand fires. They're not designed.
And just to continue that point, a few of the buildings, I don't remember which two, maybe one of you know, but they were built to withstand the exact planes that took them down.
Well, to my knowledge, okay, the World Trade Center buildings and some of the surrounding structures in the complex, which there are many buildings in the complex, were designed to withstand the
impact.
The impact of what would have been the largest airliner at the time of their construction, which was a 707.
Okay. And what planes were used?
These were 747s, according to what we're told.
I thought they were 757s.
Maybe that's a possibility. I'm not going to say that I'm 100% on that because it's been quite a while since I've studied the exact facts on it. But the standard airliners at the time were the 707. I'm sure of that because I recall reading that from the people who designed the buildings. As far as what was standard in the air that day, I got to tell you that up until 9/11, I gave that no particular thought. Who was giving a lot of thought to the airliners in the air over their heads every single day at that point in time? And to put that in context just for a second, I was living in New Jersey at the time. So when this all happened, as it was happening, I got to tell you that those of us on the ground at first thought there must have been a terrible accident. When the second plane struck, we knew very well that the city was under attack. The next thing that occurred on the ground when the buildings collapsed, when the first building collapsed, in fact, was that a great many of us in New Jersey attempted to rush into New York City to help to dig out survivors. Okay. By the time I got to the entrance points to Manhattan, I could not get into New York City because the entire island had been shut down. I spent the next month about sending supplies into people that were working to try and find people. All right, so this was a personal situation for me. I could see from across the river there that there was this tremendous amount of what appeared to be smoke to me across a good deal of the island. What I found out later was dust. A giant cloud was over part of New York City, and the skyline was obscured by it. So, to tell you that I don't just simply watch films of this and take them at face value is an understatement. Okay. So I'm curious, Chris, if you have anything to say about anything I've just put out there.
All right, yeah, I just have my mic muted. My phone keeps going off. All right. When you were explaining about the buildings that fell and the one that wasn't actually hit by a plane that still fell in that same day, I instantly came up with my own theory that could have happened because even I was not aware that that building has fell. I don't know. I'm still thinking about this whole thing. Yeah, this is bad for me. I did not see that coming.
Well, I've got to tell you something. If you want to learn a great deal about it from people who have a tremendous amount of information and expertise in the area, all you have to do is find Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. It is a large organization of structural engineers and architects whose careers are hinged upon understanding these types of things. Okay. They're currently, and I've interviewed a few of them myself to try and understand what happened that day a bit better. And I've got to tell you that they would be the preeminent group for you to try and try and sort this kind of stuff out. But Building 7 is a very serious, I hate to use the term red flag, but it is a very serious red flag in my mind, especially considering what was housed in that building.
What was in the building?
What was the building used for?
Well, first of all, there was databases which contained a lot of information that we will never ever see from the Secret Service. The CIA had an office in there. The emergency management system for New York City was essentially headquartered there. There were a great many government agencies involved in securities and exchanges, and a great many databases and investigations were disrupted and destroyed because of the because of the demolition of that building. And I use the word demolition because not even to ascribe intent, but just to describe what happened. The building was demolished, whether it be by something which hit it or by something that was placed in it. It doesn't matter. The fact is that evidence was destroyed. This is an unequivocal fact. And at that time, to put it in proper context, you were looking at investigations into securities and exchanges, which were disrupted and dismantled based on the fact that that evidence was lost. Let us not forget that the Secret Service is not just charged with defending the president, but is also an arm of the Treasury Department of the United States, okay? And there are constantly investigations into counterfeiting and subversion based on use of the currency, which are handled by the United States Secret Service. So I tell you again, the amount of investigative materials and the loss of assets based on the destruction of that building is, again, very, very suspicious. And if you don't believe me, I tell you, just search Building 7. Just search it out there, and I don't often encourage people to simply use the internet as their only research tool, but go right ahead and try and do it. You'll have to sift through some very ludicrous conspiracy theories, that's for sure. And there are plenty that are involved here. And there's been plenty of things that I have even seen through at this time that I had to dismantle personally because there are plenty of ludicrous assertions here. But if you just pare down the legitimate facts as I did, which is that all of these particular files and the storage and all of the things that were contained in that building, admittedly, and all of the things that were potentially in that building that we will never see again because of that building's destruction, you have to, at the very least, postulate that there was a good reason for that building to be destroyed.
All right, so from what I've been hearing and piecing together, that building that isn't talked about, that was not hit by one of the 4 planes, correct?
It was not. It was with.
No one claims that it was struck by a plane. No one.
So it fell during that same day under the radar during the commotion of the 2 planes hitting the 2 towers,
yes.
supposedly.
Some people say it was hit by debris, but most of it was dustified by the time it got to the building. So
let's qualify this too. First of all, the debris in a lot of cases was that wave of dust. But even buildings that were struck by ejected pieces of structural steel, even buildings that were struck by far greater amounts of flaming pieces of the towers, hotels which were in the shadow of the tower, and much smaller buildings, which would have made a whole lot more sense had they completely failed and collapsed, did not collapse. This building, which was some distance away from the 2 towers, collapsed later in the afternoon. Rather famously, though, just to add to the suspicion, a lot of people aren't aware, and this piece of film is very hard to find, but I'm sure if you try, you will. You can find film of a BBC female reporter standing in front of the building, explaining a little later in the afternoon that the building had already collapsed. And meanwhile, behind her, literally over her shoulder, you can see the building still standing. Okay?
All right, so
yeah.
Earlier you stated that the way that the buildings are built, they should not at all have collapsed, right? The 2 twin towers?
Not at all.
Based on the understanding I have from architects and engineers who have studied the design and the construction of the buildings, they were built to withstand the strikes of the largest airliner possible at the time. They were built to withstand temperatures greater than could have possibly been achieved by jet fuel having been burned. It's just a simple fact that now either there is a complete and utter structural failure, or there was a serious design flaw here, which has not been revealed before or since. because I state again, there has never been before or since 3 steel frame structured buildings of this sort that absolutely and completely failed. Because this is a complete catastrophic failure of these types of structures. This does not occur.
Guys, another 30-second break. My brother came in. I'm
Good.
sorry. I'm on Skype. Can you leave? What? Oh, Godzilla was great. Godzilla was great. Alright, I'm back.
Alright.
No problem. A complete understanding of this, you can find speeches being given by a man named Richard Gage, who is the main spokesperson for architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. And this, again, is not even beginning to look into the conspiracy theories whatsoever. This is just simply looking at the scientific and mechanical aspects of what happened that day.
So, do you believe that it was a fatal flaw in the design, or do you believe that maybe there was an attack from inside the building at roughly the same time, and the plane was used to cover it up?
I only believe this, that the truth has yet to be revealed here. I find it very difficult to believe that that there was an attack per se from inside of the building, but at the same time, the behavior of the collapses, if you analyze them, and many people have spent a great deal of time analyzing the film, they are rather suspicious. There are completely uncharacteristic aspects of not only the collapses, but of the remains of the collapses. You can find footage, and you can find still photographs with some rather bizarre anomalies. There is, the pulverization of so much of those buildings is just unfathomable from a scientific standpoint. I, by default, believe that there had to have been something other than planes striking those buildings that caused the absolute and catastrophic failure and pulverization of the elements in the buildings. I could be wrong, but it seems to me as though the evidence trying to support the idea that these 2 planes took down these 2 buildings, just speaking about the main Twin Towers here, is shaky at best.
I agree with you on the part that the building shouldn't have completely collapsed, but there was a documentary that I've seen a couple years ago about all the conspiracies and different thoughts about what could have happened on that day, and there was a small 5-minute bit of an opinion from somebody that there could have been explosives hidden inside the buildings that were planned. I don't see how that could have been possible.
Oh.
And get through security.
Well,
I can handle that for you in real fast order. I happen to have known people that have worked in that building. Okay, so this is personal experience coupled with what I learned later. All right, and I'm talking about just electricians who changed things up when they started to add sprinkler systems and stuff like this. You got to realize that these buildings haven't been constructed before the time that the internet was in use. These things were all, internet ready. There were cable wires and all sorts of things that had to be added to these buildings as time went on, all right? But just speaking to an electrician who worked there was constantly floors and sections of floors being shut off for maintenance. If someone wanted to plant explosives in the building, it is not unfeasible to do so based on the fact that there was constant maintenance in the buildings. And so that's a really bad point. Now, the idea that it might have been difficult to place dynamite in the buildings or to place, particular charges in the buildings, these things are very, very sensible. I don't think that there was, giant buckets of nitroglycerin sitting in the hallways and people just went, oh, that's funny, why is there a barrel there? No, that didn't happen, but there's other ways to do this. And not just the electrical wiring problems that went on, but I mean, there were guys that went in there
Chuck,
to paint.
can you attack another point for me?
Well, let me finish.
It goes on that topic.
Well, let me just finish with this. There were guys in there that were meant to paint. There were guys in there that were meant to do repairs, doors, things like this, wear and tear parts. If you understand that this was, a construction project begun in the 1970s and stood there for 30 years, you can imagine that there were points of maintenance that needed to be maintained. Not to mention the elevators and everything else. So there are plenty of holes in the idea that the security would have kept it, so tight in those buildings that it would have been impossible. Not only that, but the concept of the nanothermite, which I'm not saying that I even completely support, but the possibility is there because nanothermite is something that could be added to paint. Nanothermite is something that could be added to putty and could be set there until the proper temperatures are achieved and assist with the destruction of the building at the very least, if not completely do it all by itself. And these things could lay dormant until, even if you did want to sort of use the planes as incendiary devices. This is a possibility. But the fact that they tell us that no, these were merely fully loaded jetliners and jet fuel caused the steel to weaken to the point where not only did the building entirely collapse, but it was pulverized by its own weight. I'm sorry, I don't buy that. But what was your point, Dylan?
Well, if someone had suggested to me that maybe Al-Qaeda could have put them in there. Is that feasible?
Well, if it was like even just anybody, any American citizen that works in that building daily, they don't even have to be normal American citizen, but anyone who works in that building, they would have had problems keeping it there and not having anybody know about it. But the main reason why I brought that point up about maybe that there were explosives was, from what I heard, it almost sounded like that plane that crashed in the field wasn't headed to the White House like I have heard about.
Like
It might have been
the
headed
official
to
story
that.
will say.
It might have been headed to that building, that third building that was taken out, because it almost sounded like they were all taken out not by the plane, but as if the planes were used to cover it up. That's almost what it was sounding like to me. So that's why I brought up that point.
Yeah, no, it's very possible, I guess. But here's the thing: based on the fact that again the evidence is destroyed and removed quickly, because the remains of those buildings,
were shipped up to China almost instantly, right?
Were shipped right away on barges away from New York City. I don't know what their final destination was. I've heard China, but I do know factually that they were loaded onto barges and shipped right away. So the evidence is removed, redacted, and hidden from public view. I've spoken to individuals that were on the ground during the cleanup who have told me personally that they saw things that never made it to the public's mind. You don't have far to go on that either. And I'm not even saying that all of their stories are true. But let's just say that there is 100 stories out there about the finding of possible black boxes, about the finding of things that didn't belong in that rubble, about the finding of things that lead to the concept of demolition materials that were found in that rubble. Let's just say that there are 100 stories like that. If one of them is true, just one, you have the cover-up. And what is the purpose of covering something up if we were attacked by surprise by some rather ingenious guys who decided to coordinate this over a decade-long conspiracy? Where is the point of covering up any of the evidence?
That brings up a very good point. And you actually reminded me of something else that I heard about this. When the planes were, well, I suppose when 1 or 2 hit, but there were still more airborne, the U.S. stated that they sent out a couple jets, like from the Air Force, to go and deal with the planes that were not listening to air control to land immediately or to go on a certain course.
Mhm.
Therefore, they could pinpoint the ones that were still hijacked, and they were ordered to shoot down any that actually didn't have any evidence to show that they were normal planes. So basically, what I read were a lot of the fighters left without any live ammunition. Do you really think they would just take off if they have nothing to down the plane with? Like, the government stated that they just left without ammunition, but I'm sure if they were serious about taking down an aircraft, they would take the time to load ammunition before they head out. Otherwise, there's not much that they can do other than crash it into the jet.
Well, this is true,
or
but
plane.
this is true to some degree. But here's the problem: there was a lot of confusion that day, and I ascribe part of those problems to really the surprise and confusion. I think that a lot of that is not conspiratorial, but again, if you dig deeply enough, you will find a lot of strange things that happen there. A lot of planes were ordered to escort, control, and had the option to shoot down civilian planes that were not obeying the all stop. This is a fact, but the disorganized fashion really revealed more to me the ineptness, the unprepared nature of our military for a strike on our own ground. The idea that planes were sent up without munitions in order to deal with it is of no surprise to me. When a plane goes up in the air, let's begin with this. When a plane goes up in the air for something like this, they should be on the ready, but they are not always loaded with every type of missile or with every type of ammunition necessary, because some planes are used for reconnaissance only, and some planes in training exercises you don't want to necessarily always have them with live munitions, because if they crash over a civilian target or something like that, it becomes a much more complex issue if you have atomic weapons linked to the planes. I mean, this is an old problem. So I would say that there is a serious show of the ineptness and unprepared nature of our airborne assets on that day, for certain. Now, there is a whole entire nebulous thing which people have also spent a lot of time on trying to dissect what happened that day. And many of us are familiar with the idea that Vice President Cheney was in a bunker, and I think it was Panetta who explained that there was orders being given, and were there orders to shoot down the plane in Pennsylvania and all that kind of stuff. I think that a lot of that, I may be wrong again, a lot of that though just lends itself more to the unprepared nature of our domestic assets at the time.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the point about our air units, because according to the information I have, NORAD, the defense systems were ordered to stand down at the time that the planes were, at the time the buildings were struck.
Well, right, and then that leads us into the whole conversation about the exercises which were going on that day, which there were many, to simulate attacks, to simulate our preparedness, to simulate the scrambled nature, and that didn't just involve
ironically enough, they were doing drills on what actually happened.
Right, they were doing aircraft, and here's the funny part, is that for a little while there, to begin the whole confusion was the air traffic control problem, because air traffic control was actually drilling the idea that there were planes being hijacked, and they didn't know which ones were real world. I mean, everybody's heard these tapes now. Is this real world or is this exercise? They didn't know, because there were plenty of artificial blips, in other words, like phantom blips being fed into their air traffic control systems to simulate these planes being up in the air and being diverted and otherwise rogue. So that in and of itself seems suspicious to me again,
But let's just again try to assume that this is all, you know, an innocuous sort of thing that was going on just for a moment. Why didn't someone turn those things off the moment that we knew we had a problem? And everyone in this entire country was alive at the time and had access to a radio or a television. Even if you thought to yourself, wow, that's a terrible thing that a plane struck a building, when the second plane struck, we all knew that we were under attack.
Mhm.
Now,
except for the people who were in charge of the air defense systems, apparently.
yeah, it took nearly an hour for them to basically shut down these so-called exercises, you know, from the first strike to then, and it was only, I think, 28 minutes between the two strikes, 28 to 45 minutes, something like this. And I'm going from my own memory now. I know within an hour, we all knew, and I do mean we all knew, that the second tower had been hit. There was like maybe one or two networks that weren't sure what was going on because they were looking at aerial pictures and they didn't even realize that the second building had been struck because they thought they were still looking at the primary fire. If you look at the footage, the uncut footage from that day, you can find that confusion, and it's reasonable because who the hell would have thought a second plane was going to hit a building right next to the first building that was struck? That was almost unimaginable.
Yeah, at the time of the incident, when the first plane struck, people assumed that it was an accident, an explosion, and people couldn't even come to terms with that. And once they saw that second plane hit, that's when everyone just sort of lost it and had no idea what was going on until a little after, when they actually thought about it, they realized that it was an attack. But at first, if there was an explosion, I'd be going, is that really happening? I wouldn't even be coming to terms that it's an accident. But
Well,
then,
right, when you disconnect yourself from this a little bit, you think about the way that we were interpreting it, you know, the civilians were interpreting it on the ground. It was immediately newscasters and all of us were discussing amongst ourselves that, you know, some decades back, a plane had strayed into Manhattan airspace and struck the Empire State Building.
Mm-hmm.
It had happened before. So it was automatically assumed by those of us paying attention that, wow, this is a terrible thing. Somebody made a mistake. That was the first strike. The second one, though, that is when things began to change. And it's amazing to me that that the military, who was responsible for controlling the airspace at that point, because when the second plane hit, there was basically an all-stop put out there as far as the FAA was concerned.
And just another point to add onto your discussion about the military and the planes. A no-fly zone was declared on the area before the first strike.
well, that was only against like commercial planes. All emergency aircraft and military were still allowed to do.
But the Boeing planes were commercial.
Yes, but they were supposedly hijacked, so they
Right.
just
But
went
if there
through.
was a no-fly zone declared, wouldn't there be people guarding the airspace?
Well, that's what we were talking about. But
Yeah,
they
see-
sent up the jets without ammunition, so they couldn't really defend anything.
Well, they were first sent up to evaluate because regardless of what the air traffic control signals showed them, another thing that's usually done is to verify visually by pilots. I mean, this is the way it was done then anyway. To verify with a pilot's vision, you know, is that a plane? Where is it? Where is it going? Does it appear to be, you know, flying erratically? Has their communication failed? Things like this are tested visually by pilots. The no-fly zone, as far as I understand, it couldn't have been put into place beforehand because there were helicopters up in the air. This is where your news footage, your aerial news footage came from and everything else. So I don't think that an entire no-fly zone was put into place excuse me, before the first strike. Just logically speaking, I mean, look, the entire thing becomes a very confused mess, and to some degree, reasonably so, because as we just covered here, you know, there was literally no expectation of this kind of thing. New York City constantly has airplanes and helicopters and all sorts of things flying over it. So there is a great deal to sort out in order to create a sort of a safe buffer around the island of Manhattan that would not have been put into place immediately or easily that day. And as far as I know, there was no no-fly zone sort of put into place beforehand. I mean, maybe there's something there, I don't know. I mean, it's very easy for me to have missed something like that, but to the best of my knowledge, until that first plane hit, there was no alarm sort of sounded among the civilian or military communication systems outside of the drills, which we were discussing earlier. But drills constantly going on are not unusual either. The unusual fact there, though, is that some of the drills were rather eerily similar to what happened. That is the real serious red flag again.
There are a lot of red flags in this scenario.
Well, see, this is what the problem is. You know, just like when he was stating about the Bin Laden admissions, there are some factoids out there about that which I'd like to address quickly. The idea that there is a fat Bin Laden tape out there, and take a look at the man, he doesn't resemble him, and all this other stuff. This is a misrepresentation of the reality. The trouble with the aspect ratio on that video is that it is PAL and NTSC conversion. You can create a distortion where you have, and you guys have seen this stuff probably if you ever watched cable television and you looked at, say, kung fu movies, okay? And you see that sometimes in, like, say, Chinese originated kung fu movies, are like the people seem really tall and skinny for no reason. Things like this. This is a miscalculation in the aspect conversion between the PAL and NTSC broadcast formats. Okay, the original tape there is admittedly not in the United States coding for broadcast formats. So when you properly properly adjust the PAL to the NTSC format, Bin Laden doesn't look so fat anymore, and looks rather interestingly very much like he should look. So you know you have to consider the source, and you have to consider how the source was handled before you make a judgment like that. And I say again that there are language problems with that tape. And when you look at some of the translations, again, I am not an expert on the Arabic language, but I do know that there are nuances in the Arabic language that may not have necessarily been captured on the audio of that tape. And one analyst's viewpoint of that can easily differ from another based on the gestures and the context of the commentary. So simply reading an English translation there and saying there it is, there he is admitting to it, is a rather vaporous and shallow interpretation of it. So I caution you to pay a little more attention about what is being said and the context in which it is being said there. And that is not even approaching the authenticity of the tape and the circumstances by which it was created.
Well, that actually goes to my question. Do you think they were pre-recorded? Because I don't know, I don't remember where I heard this, but Osama bin Laden supposedly died in November of kidney failure of 2001.
Well, you know, we would have we should know this a whole lot better than we do as to whether that's true or not, because after all, he was in a hospital and in the virtual custody of our CIA just previous to that in a hospital in Dubai, being treated supposedly for kidney failure. So, you know, whether he was on dialysis, dying, or dead at the time this occurred, this also needs to play into our consideration of his abilities to handle the logistical responsibilities for heading the Al-Qaeda organization to begin with, which I constantly refer to as Al-CIA anyway. Now, putting that aside just for a moment, guys, when you brought up at the beginning of the show here about whether it was, the possibility that that our assets were participating with the Al Qaeda assets in order to foment warfare in Afghanistan or in the Middle East or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Here's your problem, and I want you to just go ahead and look at this for yourself. Take a look at the amount of time elapsed between the time that we were attacked on 9/11, and I do believe that nobody talking on this little broadcast here would disagree that our nation's soil was violated by someone on 9/11/2001.
No, nobody can argue with that.
Now, whether it was violated from enemies within the United States or from without, this is debatable. But let us begin with that assertion. Take a look at the time elapsed between then and our incursion into Afghanistan. Okay? Tell me something. How long was that? The amount of time between the events of 9/11 and our putting boots and assets on the ground in Afghanistan.
I believe correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was sometime around a year or less.
What do you think, Chris?
I honestly do not know when the U.S. first landed there.
All right, well, you guys do me a favor and see what you can figure out about that. But we'll just use Dylan's assertion at less than a year. Okay, just temporarily here. I would love to just pop open a browser and take a look at the moment, but, when you look at the reality of the logistical concerns for moving all of the assets into Afghanistan.
Okay, I found the day. October 7th, 2001.
Well, October 7th, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was when they first started. They may have not have been that serious when they first went over. I'm pretty sure it's just when they landed foot there.
That is, okay. I'll tell you what happened there. What we were doing there was we were in support of what we called the Northern Alliance at the time against the Taliban. If everybody looks back at the way this evolved, that is when we first started to support them directly. Okay? We had assets there, and if you look at the history now of the incursions into Afghanistan, you'll find that we were there within less than 90 days. In full effect, basically. Our assets were on the ground, not just supporting the so-called Northern Alliance, but we were there rather quickly. Now, just as a matter of logic and logistics, how long do you think it would actually take to mobilize us and to get our assets into that country and to be able to operate like that?
Longer than 90 days.
Yeah, that's what I see. So doesn't that seem as though that may have been something that was thought of ahead of time?
I almost certainly think it was.
Now, I just challenge anybody out there who's listening, go ahead and take a look at the logistical concerns for what it was we did, and if you can't see that there's an incongruous kind of nature to it, that it doesn't seem as though we would have had some knowledge about the desire to invade Afghanistan prior to September 11th.
Well, we had a memo about 9/11 in August.
Well, yeah, that's the whole, Bin Laden seeks to attack within the United States memo.
I thought if I'm not wrong, the memo said, and I'm probably paraphrasing, Bin Laden to fly planes into towers.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the exact language of it, but those national security briefings are daily, and they contain lots of things which presidents ignore, which the ostensive head of the CIA ignores, etc., etc. It looks rather nefarious, but believe me, there are millions of those things that go by without ever anything occurring.
Of course, I'm not basing everything off of that. I'm I'm piggybacking off of your point that they probably did want to go in early.
Oh yeah, but I mean, if you want to look at this even further, you know, can somebody explain to me truthfully and honestly what we ended up doing in Iraq? Because when you ask
slaughtering children for no reason.
Well, that's what we do all across the planet at this point.
And that's fair.
You know, and this is the terrible, disgusting thing that occurs. And you know what? Forget about the Middle East. You want to go a little further back into history? You want to go into not too further back in history? You can just look at the South American, the entire South American situation, the entire Central American situation, the absolute wholesale murder of individuals in Guatemala.
The Northern African war we're in currently, where we're using drone strikes in North Africa.
This as well. Also rather undercovered by any media assets, it seems, is the entire opening of the African theater, which you know, which the modern genesis of was in Libya, but has been a constant. We support all sorts of regimes going back to our adventures in the 1960s in the Congo.
I always say when people bring up how could we have supported bin Laden in the 80s? Well, we back a bunch of evil people in our history. That's just one example.
That's not even the worst example, and bin Laden not even at that point in time, even, you know, if you remove the 9/11 thing from him, you know, he wasn't all that serious a threat as far as the people that we supported who were murderers. All you have to do is look at El Salvador, and you can find, you know, tens of thousands of individuals who have disappeared. I mean, the concept of South American death squads is a known historical fact, and we supported plenty of those guys.
And we also, and correct me if I'm wrong again, we tried to form an alliance with Joseph Stalin before FDR's death.
We didn't try, we did. The victory of World War II would not have been achieved without Stalin's assistance.
And Stalin would later follow Hitler's route and round up his citizens and murder them.
Well, put that in proper context. He didn't later follow it. He was always following it. A totalitarian regime does not allow great numbers of resistant individuals to stand up together. This is common practice.
Mm-hmm. I think he might be the worst example of people we backed.
He may be, but you know what? There are so many to choose from. You know, we had no business looking at Vietnam. We had no business supporting the Catholic regimes of Diem and New. We had no business doing that at all. We really were extending ourselves even further after supporting the French, because a lot of people forget that as well. The French in Indochina were supporting plenty of regimes in Laos, in Cambodia, and in Vietnam itself.
We did back the Cambodians, I believe, when they became a regime.
All the way up until the madman policy caused us to, you know, basically bomb the hell out of civilians that were not even involved in the Vietnamese conflict at the time, even though we claimed that they were supporting the Viet Cong. You got to be kidding me. That was done by Nixon, and you know, under the my goodness, you know, Henry Kissinger doctrine of warfare in Indochina.
If we're talking about evil people, though, we do have to bring up his name.
Well, listen, you said evil, I jumped right to that thought. I'm sorry. You know, a lot of people like to ascribe Nixon as being one of the most, you know,
not
characters.
Not Nixon.
Oh,
Kissinger.
I know, but that's what I was going to say. Is a lot of people like to ascribe the actions of Richard Nixon to being the most evil in American history and all that. He is far from the most evil thing we ever had with any sort of power under the auspices of the United States government. So, you know, look at the history itself. Look at the actual admitted mainstream history, and you can find plenty of it. I mean, I discussed with you the other day the Gulf of Tonkin incident.
Yeah, and how our defense secretary at the time knew it would happen, misled us into the war.
Well, yeah, sort of reluctantly, because this is the same defense secretary under Kennedy who presided over the time where we issued National Security Action Memorandum 263, which would have withdrawn 1,000 troops because we had about 15,000 in Vietnam at the time Kennedy was killed, would have withdrawn the first 1,000 immediately in 1963 and would have had all U.S. personnel, not just military personnel, but all U.S. personnel, including the support agencies and the corporate entities that were over there involved in the support of warfare, withdrawn by the end of calendar year 1965. Thusly, there would have not been the Vietnam conflict. There would have been no need for the additional 56,000 of the 58,000 total casualties for the United States, not to mention the
58,000 died in Gulf of Tonkin, I thought.
No. That is over the course of the war. That is the amount of casualties officially reported by the U.S. military.
Okay,
But that doesn't account for the more than 1 million men which were otherwise mutilated, whether spiritually, psychologically, or physically, returned to the United States.
The Agent Orange.
Damaged, destroyed, poisoned, and you know what? Here's the factor that people leave out of it all the time, and I refuse to leave it out. That is that anywhere from 1.5 to 4 million Vietnamese died during the course of that conflict. Now, if that is not characteristic of a genocide over the course of a decade, I don't know what is. So, when we begin to discuss the types of evil things that occur, there is no shortage of them.
Oh, and you can disagree on this. The three most evil people in our history, that got into office, I think, are Henry Kissinger, Dick Cheney, and George Bush.
Well, I don't know if I would put them on the top 3, but they're certainly in the top 10. But Chris, I haven't given you a chance to talk much. I mean, what do you want to bring up here?
I was while you kept talking about all the regimes and all the conflicts that were happening over around the Middle East or back when Dick Cheney and them were in power. I don't really know when they were in power because I don't follow American politics.
Okay, well let me give you a little hint about Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld. They first came to prominence during the Ford administration. Okay, they were part of the White House staff during that time. Okay, and they remained in power off and on all the way from then till the early 2000s, being integral players in U.S. politics. Okay, just so you know.
All right.
But I'm surprised it took us so long to figure out that they were evil.
Well, because quite honestly, you know, the whole Ford administration, which came about because of the removal of Spiro Agnew first, and then Richard Nixon from office, both of them resigning in disgrace, and Ford essentially being the only person ever to ascend to the presidency of the United States without the benefit of having been elected either a president or a vice president. And by the way, he was also one of the fabled Warren commissioners who assisted in the cover-up of the JFK assassination, and that's just a side note. Yeah, Michigan Representative Gerald R. Ford was generally seen as a bumbling fool, sort of, on the world stage of politics. Most famously, people constantly made jokes about him falling and tripping and things like this, which he did publicly a few times, you know, bumping his own head and things in public.
Well, there have been a lot of embarrassing moments for our leaders, like George Bush having a shoe thrown at him.
Yeah, or you know, or somebody named Bush having to throw up in the lap of a Chinese, you know, delegate or whatever. I mean, there's plenty of it. There's plenty of it to go around, and you could say people are human, and you know, God knows, just because you know, people had said that Gerald Ford couldn't, you know, chew gum and take a leak at the same time, doesn't mean it wasn't true, but you got to put it in context again. So when they had, you know, serious power during the sort of bumbling Ford administration, people weren't going to take them very seriously. We had at that point removed ourselves from the Vietnam conflict, and so the nation as a whole was not engaged in.
Well, if you want to, sorry, going back to a previous point about the Vietnam genocide.
Right.
That's a genocide. I think the Afghani and Iraq, the Middle Eastern genocide is a larger one at whole.
You may be very well right. I think that we have not had the benefit of the perspective to finish counting the bodies.
No, because we're still there doing drone strikes.
Well, this is another thing. Is we're out of these wars supposedly. Oh, gee, we don't have anybody in Iraq, but yet there are still people being killed in Iraq that are ostensibly ours. We have people being killed in Afghanistan, which are ostensibly ours. How are we not engaged in warfare over there? And you know what? On top of that, you have the Pakistani situation.
And you have the Yemen situation.
Yemeni, there's things that occur in Qatar, all throughout the Middle East.
Libya, Syria.
Well, Libya is North Africa, so
that's true. But Syria, we're backing the Syrian rebels, which I might add are Al Qaeda.
Right. But look, the contradiction in our policy is no clearer than it could be in Afghanistan, where military assets are literally guarding the opium crops of local warlords at this point in order to supposedly keep the peace. And this is admitted. This stuff is actually out there. You can find it if you want. We're guarding it supposedly because we need to support the local economy so that they don't fall back under the Taliban regime. Are you kidding me? All
that's
you need
the
to
best
look at,
you got.
Yeah, that's the best you got. I mean, you're gonna arrest and jail and punish heroin users in the United States, when meanwhile we are supporting the exportation of something like 80% of the world's heroin crops by supporting the opium farmers there in Afghanistan, which under the Taliban regime in reality was reduced to almost nothing. And where does that fit into the equation, don't you wonder? That's why I look at guys who wrote about this, like Douglas Valentine, who has written not only Operation Phoenix, but has also written a book called Strength of the Wolf and another one called Strength of the Pack, about the intermingling of the DEA, the CIA, the FBI, and various alphabet agencies in the propagation and trafficking of the drugs throughout the planet. When we were much more involved in South American adventures, cocaine was a very popular drug on the streets of America. As we, insert ourselves into the Middle East and into the Mediterranean theaters, et cetera, what do we end up with? A greater amount of heroin that is practically a scourge on our society at this point.
I know it's off the topic of the Middle East and 9/11. How long is it before we get into Ukraine?
Well, that depends, doesn't it?
I was actually just thinking about that.
How long before we decide, hey, we can't let Russia actually let their citizens vote?
Okay, so with everything we've talked about in the Middle East and in the U.S. about how you guys sort of started with the fact that some in power were evil, up until the point where you guys were talking about all the genocides and then the drugs. Going back a bit with Osama bin Laden, whatever, and George Bush, do you think that they were in contact around this time?
Almost.
Around 2001?
I think they were, but I have nothing to back that up with.
Well, Osama himself, I'm not sure. However, contacts between the Bush family and the bin Laden family are, again, matters of public record. And even a propagandist like Michael Moore had the sense to illustrate some of that for us. There was plenty of reason for these billionaires to be involved with each other. I mean, after all, the Carlyle Group and this type of evidence and the support of the support agencies which would benefit from what I call the policy of brush fire warfare, where we're basically engaged in conflicts which have no discernible exit strategy and no achievable sort of end game, and the constant propping up and support of the military agencies, whether it be by supplying food or uniforms or equipment or anything else. I mean, there are billions and billions of dollars to be made, fortunes and power structures to be built off of the backs of those people and to be built off of those particular enterprises.
War means profit.
It certainly does.
And
Not in all cases.
why do you think the U.S. loves war?
Well, wait a minute. How does war not mean profit in all cases?
Well, sometimes when it comes down to it, especially in the Middle East, I wouldn't say an actual country-on-country war, but even civil wars. I mean,
Civil
those
wars
are usually driven by beliefs like religion.
We're not saying it's driven
Okay.
by profit, but it's certain wars are, like the U.S.'s wars.
There
but what-
could be profit, but a lot of times,
What we're
if you're, yeah, like I know what you guys are talking about. How
Well, what happens here, and let's try and put this in context. I mean, in serious context, we have no further to look than our own Civil War, if you like. Okay, the amount of money which was made from that conflict is imaginable at this point.
it wasn't.
And because-
let's put it in proper context again. It wasn't made by us. It was made by corporations.
Well, not just the corporations, but listen, who benefits best when two sides are battling each other and requiring to be resupplied, rebuilt, and even the industry of disposing of bodies and everything else? Okay, the people that finance those particular industries, those companies, those corporations are generally the same people on both sides. You can find that there are banks backing not only one side but the other. World War II is a perfect example of this.
Rothschild banks backed the U.S., but also funded Hitler.
Well, yeah, exactly. Here's the deal with that, and this is something you can find out, and this links directly to Bush. Chase Manhattan Bank in New York, okay, essentially was investigated and brought up and had a lot of their assets frozen and taken away from them because they were literally backing. They were literally called onto the carpet for trading with the enemies, because during World War II they were literally supplying and funding the Third Reich. I mean, this happened. If you look at the amount of money, see, Fritz Tyson is often brought up as the financier of the Third Reich. The problem is this with the Tyson theory on that. He didn't have enough assets to back the Third Reich. He was being supported by others. Companies like DuPont were sitting there and giving them the fuel for the planes that were rolling over and bombing our supposed allies. There was
The Bush family.
Prescott Bush was, one of the controlling people on the board of the Chase Manhattan Bank at the time that they were called on the carpet for the Trading with the Enemies Act. And that there, Prescott Bush, by the way, is the father of George H.W. Bush, thusly the grandfather of George W. Bush. And, did Prescott Bush spend any time in prison for that?
No, he's rich.
No, exactly. And this is the point. When you're able to fund both sides, and that's not to say that the Bushes didn't also put their money behind us and help with the conversions.
I think they would have had to.
Because that's the thing, is if you're basically backing both sides,
You can't be
then
attacked.
you can, first of all, you insulate yourself, and this is what happens. And if you study the finances of warfare in the modern age, you'll definitely find that the bankers backed both sides of most conflicts.
Including the Revolutionary War.
Absolutely. The only struggle you had there was between the French banking elite and the English banking elite, realistically. those were the two people that were actually struggling. The initial stuff that started happening was long before there were enough redcoats here to even challenge us. But don't take my word for it. Take a look at the financing of the war, and then also examine for yourselves the restitution afterwards, the rebuilding of cities, the reconstituting of military assets which are expended during wartime. All of these things benefit who? The financiers. And that is an absolute fact.
Chris, is there anything you want to add? You've been a little quiet. We just want to give you a chance to talk if you have it.
Yeah, I'm learning as I go along here.
I'm sorry. I have a tendency to run on a little bit, but it's because I really try to give as full an answer to anything that I hear questioned that I can. So I do apologize, Chris, and I'm going to try and shut up. And please, go on with anything you want to bring up here.
Well, if it's anything, you were talking about how the Third Reich had problems with, not problems, but they were being funded by other ways, as you have said. But a lot of countries were funded almost criminally back then, but that was mainly because of the Great Depression, because that's how the Third Reich was pretty much formed. Nobody was really leading Germany, and they were a hated country back then.
You can make that argument, but both sides, in a war, it's illegal for
But back when it first started, though, they weren't really enemies, because the Third Reich, nobody was really against the Third Reich until when it started getting really bad and the concentration camps were getting full of, back when the Holocaust started. The Third Reich was built up and funded for, when did they start? 1930, 1932, something around that time. So.
Okay, proper context there is post-World War I Germany. Post-World War I Germany was a wreck. It was in a shambles. The monetary system had collapsed, and obviously when people are starving and people are hungry, they look for people to blame. So it was rather convenient that the National Socialist Party was sort of overtaken by the ideology that later led to the rise of the Third Reich. This is correct. But that philosophical belief system required finance, okay? Without the finance that came initially, they would have never risen to power. They would have just been another poor person, another poor person's committee screaming and complaining about, the Jews or whoever. And that's something that almost mysteriously seems to happen, doesn't it? They go from being from being a disorganized, starving mob into being a well-organized machine. The philosophical points that came up during the evolution of what became known as the Third Reich come from various sources. And what cannot be forgotten there is the entire concept of eugenics, and the entire concept of the master race was formed based on some occult knowledge, and the humanist movement, which was based here in the United States. And it's absolutely provable that there were eugenicists from the United States influencing the policy and the rise of the philosophy that led to all of that in Germany at the time. This is the thing, though, is you got to put it in its correct context. The other thing was that initially Hitler's allowance for being able to do what he was doing was sort of like being allowed to reclaim what was formerly part of Germany anyway. And that was allowable by his neighbors and so on and so forth for various reasons. So I wouldn't say that... but I would have to say that no matter what, you can see that there was outside influence. You can trace some of it, and I'm not saying that these were the only aspects to what fed that machine, but it is awfully suspect when it just seems like at the end of the day, when all of the people are murdered and the cities are destroyed, the only beneficiaries, generally speaking, are those who finance both sides.
Okay, so with where you came up, or not came up, where you came from with that statement, do you think that a similar thing where it's being funded like from and for both sides, do you think that was like 9/11, but 9/11 was on a smaller scale of it?
Well, we have yet to see the end of what 9/11 has brought us. We have go ahead.
Do you think it will end in a way like that?
Well, you see, that's why I brought up the concept of brush fire warfare, because the change as of post the Korean conflict, okay, which, you know, I dare anyone to explain to me what we achieved there, but you know, in realistic terms, you know, we went from basically conducting warfare as a nation with clear and achievable goals and exit strategies to inserting ourselves into places without, you know, clear-cut goals, without clear-cut achievable, you know, ideas, and this is what has gone on ever since. In Vietnam, what did we truly accomplish? Not much outside of the death and destruction and the need to continuously feed things. You know, unless you want to say that we reduced our own populace through the action of the Vietnam War, well, that's a possibility. But outside of that, there was plenty of, again, the financiers that gained. You know, Brown and Root Construction was part of that. They later lead to the evolution of what we now call Halliburton, okay, which I think now has, you know, so many different corporate arms, you can't even identify what has grown out of Halliburton. You know what I'm saying? And
Halliburton, during the Middle East conflict, Halliburton's stock rose 5 times.
Well, right. Plus, like I say, the you know, sort of tangential companies to it, the offspring companies of it, have also been spawned and you know, grown up on this entire business of conducting warfare in the Middle East. And like I said, you know, Afghanistan and Iraq are two easily traceable points, but
they're not the only points.
No, when you consider our adventures in Pakistan, Yemeni, all across the various peninsulas,
Syria.
The Syrian actions, our involvement with assets being involved in what they now call the Arab Springs, the adventures into North Africa and all this stuff, which was all spawned.
The possible, I say possible, adventure into Ukraine. It's possible. There's been evidence saying we're backing the both sides of that conflict, but that's not concrete.
Yeah, it becomes rather nebulous because of the intermingling of the intelligence agencies, the military assets, and our use of agents provocateur throughout the world.
Although that phone call between the EU and I forget who else, talking about who should be installed as the new prime minister, talking about people they think should be put in place of Yanukovych, does kind of incriminate the EU and the Western forces.
Yeah, this is true, but you know, I caution you to think about the context of the phone call. We don't know it.
We don't, but that's why I'm saying it's not concrete, because there could have been anything before it, anything after it. There's a lot of propaganda on both sides.
Well, and this is a serious problem, and like I've said, I know I've said it off the air. I don't know if I've ever addressed it on my own show, but I need to tell you that that even trying to follow the events that we're seeing broadcast to us here in the Western world that are occurring over there, and talking to people, literally myself speaking one-on-one with individuals who are present, okay, in that part of the world. Simple things like I speak to a couple of people in Minsk on occasion for various reasons. They see no evidence, the days that Putin was supposedly visiting there, they see no evidence of a foreign dignitary having entered their city. Okay, there are incidents where we see, you know, great clashes of violence in the street. I talked to someone who lives, you know, in a building that you can see on the screen, okay, and they're telling me that they did not see that level of violence occurring that week. We're looking at a very disjointed and propaganda-filled sort of creation. And it doesn't mean that you need to trust or distrust, you know, the RTs and the CNNs of the world, but the fact is that it's not the reality of what's going on there. It's not in real time.
And
it's not being reported to you correctly.
can I bring up another point about that propaganda?
Well, one thing, though, to make judgments based on these releases of so-called conversations, to make judgments based on the releases and the identification of filmed events that are occurring over there on that side of the world, unless you're talking to people that are on the ground there yourself personally, and you can trust what they're telling you, you can't necessarily buy all of it. Some
No,
of
you
it is
can't.
real.
And you
Some of it
can't
is
even. And the video I was referring to with the phone call was a video by Stormcloud's Gathering.
Okay.
Ukraine situation, what you're not being told, it was called. But you can't even trust the alternative media at times.
No,
You can't trust the Alex Jones of the world, or the or sometimes even the AMTVs or any other big networks.
Well, this is for certain, and this is why I get myself in a lot of trouble with this, but I really don't care. Bottom line is this: if you are going to take anything I am saying and absolutely believe me, then you are a fool. What you need to do is to begin to investigate this and compare and contrast the facts versus what is actual evidence versus what is occurring before you make a judgment. If you simply take my word or anyone's word, regardless of whether they have $1 million behind them or they get $10 worth of donations in a month to run their media assets, my friends, you are not using your brains, and I really hope that some of you do. Critical thought does not need to die in our time. Okay?
It all but has, but
yes, it has.
They say they're teaching you that in school, but I'm in the U.S. education system. I can vouch for the fact that they're not.
No, they're teaching you limitations.
Yes.
And this is why I always give you the counterpoint, which is don't necessarily buy this stuff. And Alex Jones at this point is somebody who, in my opinion, is practically controlled opposition. I have some respect for some of the stuff that he has done, but in reality, I don't support him, and I don't support any of these people at this point because
I stopped watching his show. The only time I've ever had respect for him was when he went on Piers Morgan's show. That was entertaining.
Yeah, entertaining, sure, but if you understand that it was entertainment, fine. But you know what? When I'm, still observing his statements and his analyzation of the news, and now I see him shifting from telling us that, the false left-right paradigm is, basically you rooting for one side or the other of the very same team.
It's like a sports event, basically. That's what these political debates are.
It is a reality, and it's a distraction from the true nature of what's going on. But now, if you have taken any notice of Alex Jones lately, you'll find that the guy seems to be saying, well, it's still a false political left-right paradigm, but at the same time, you should really support the right-wing side of it because they're not quite as bad as the left-wing side of it.
They're equally bad. The only difference between them, and I don't remember where I saw this quote, is how quickly their knees hit the floor.
You know what? Not bad. Not bad. I tell you this, not only is the symbol of the United States. Our animal is the bald eagle and all that. But the bird of fascism flies with both a left and a right wing as well. Okay, and this is what we're dealing with at this point.
And it's not just us. I want to add that for international viewers, and Chris is from Canada. I wanted to add that because it's everyone. It's Canada as well.
Well, yeah, but being that we ostensibly are still one of the largest players in the world when it comes to this kind of intrigue, let's just say, it's my perspective because this is where I'm sitting. But to say that everything is wrong in our country and our world because of Barack Obama, that's foolish. To say that everything in this world is wrong and sick and screwed up because of George W. Bush, that is also foolish. You can keep going back and back and back, and I think that the last time that a president actually wielded any power in this country was prior to November 22nd, 1963, when John F. Kennedy was murdered in broad daylight in Dallas, Texas.
And really, people often go to guys like Abraham Lincoln. No, the only two people that ever wielded power in my eyes, this might be different for others, are John F. Kennedy and Andrew Jackson.
Well, Jackson is an interesting study. That's for certain. And, I advise anybody to start to learn about him because you'll find out about what it's like when somebody does try to wield power and the bankers have it in for him. I wouldn't say that Kennedy was the only one and Jackson was the only one. There are various guys who did wield some power who weren't entirely puppets the entire time. Some people that seem innocuous in American history are not. And some people that seem to have been, sort of the bumbling fools in American history, I really advise you to stop buying that propaganda as well. Because it's not exactly one-dimensional as they try and sell it to us. Lincoln made a great deal of mistakes, obviously, and presided over the inception of the Civil War. I mean, you can't think of anything more damaging or horrendous to the spirit of this nation than the Civil War in reality, for us personally. But the fact that we have now exported that type of genocide throughout the planet is just one of those things that grabs at my guts. So I apologize if I've gone on and on and on here, but
you're good. This is what we wanted, a discussion.
And we got far away from the 9/11 problem,
Yeah.
but it does point.
That's why I've been quiet.
It does point directly to the evolution, though, of this brush fire warfare policy, which has made us as an entity, if you will, as a nation state, probably one of the most vicious and murderous regimes on the planet.
And Chris, I hope this show gets you to pay closer attention to American politics, because, like it or not, it will affect everyone else in the world, and it's already starting to, at least on the West.
I don't know.
Anything to add,
I'm joking,
Chuck?
yeah. I'll be listening to you guys a lot.
Well, I also do my own show. Just I'm going to mention that real quick here, which I do on ucy.tv. And you can find it at ucy.tv/TOE, which stands for The Ocelli Effect. I do much more focused shows than probably we're doing right now, because I've kind of been all over the map, and I apologize for that, Dylan. But
You're fine. You're giving a lot of good information. It's one thing to stutter and stutter around topics and not bring up anything useful, than to go to different topics and be able to connect them back to the original topic and bring us good information. I didn't know about the stuff in World Trade Center 7. I learned something in the first 10 minutes of the show.
Well, and it's just, another illustrative point, by the way, and this is something I did want to make sure we brought up about the 9/11 situation, is, let us also not forget the Pentagon, which, there is plenty of suspicious stuff there. If you wanted to ignore New York City completely and just study the Pentagon and what happened and how it occurred, don't forget that on September 11th, we had missing funds, misappropriated, disappearing funds.
Weren't there? I read a report that somewhere close to $6 trillion were lost in 9/11.
I don't know if it was 6 trillion. To try and calculate the entire costs, I haven't done that personally, so I don't know if that number is even remotely accurate. I do know that on September 10th of 2001, there was an announcement about billions of dollars. I mean, I think it was something like $500 billion that had simply evaporated from the Pentagon, basically.
Interesting that report came out a day before the biggest tragedy in our history since John F. Kennedy's assassination.
Exactly, and along with that, what part of the Pentagon was struck? Well, it would happen to be the area of the Pentagon where a lot of those records were kept, where, the only part of it that had actually recently been reinforced to withstand that as well. And there's plenty of suspicious stuff going on there. I mean, we look at a hole in the Pentagon which is inconsistent with an airliner having struck it. We look at the aerial acrobatics of the plane that would have had to have been achieved to fit with the official story and the radar data, and the refusal of the U.S. government to this day to provide us with the visual record, which would have proven that airliner struck that building in exactly the manner they stated. These things alone are rather suspect and lead to what is, the ultimate cover-up, which, in my opinion, was the 9/11 Commission report, which, everybody famously knows had to be agreed upon by committee in order for facts to be added to the report. You got one volume this time, and I think that they learned their lesson from the Warren Commission, because this time they didn't release the ridiculous, nebulous, and inconsistent evidence to accompany the report. That stuff is classified now.
They learned their lesson. They essentially, in the Warren Commission, gave us all the information we needed to prove that JFK wasn't assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald.
Right. They basically did that themselves.
They did it for us.
Yeah, I mean, I had John Kellen on my show not long ago who wrote about this and believes that really by the end of 1964 we knew the answers enough to know what the problem was with the JFK assassination. And I couldn't find a way to honestly disagree with him, even though I spent 20 years long after that studying the case myself. But with the 9/11 Commission report, we got the report. The documents are not in our hands still.
Eventually we'll get them, I'm sure, but it'll probably be long after anyone cares.
Redacted, missing, misleading, nonsense is what happens, and this is what happened with JFK assassination. 50 years later, there's still 365 cubic feet worth of paper which they will not release to us. So I don't hold a great deal of optimism for the release of the documentation that'll be required to convict our own government in the public mind. Not until all of us who were alive that day are virtually dead or are all dead and gone, and it becomes an academic exercise in history.
Well, that's essentially what happened with JFK. We're still doing the research. We're still trying to prove to the public that it was fake.
Oh, yeah.
Even though 51% of the population doesn't believe the official story, there's probably still a good half of that total of people who don't believe the official story that think the mob could have done it.
Well, this is true as well, and the problem with your 51%, and I told you this before, is that that's the most conservative estimate. At any point in time, we have had anywhere from 65 to 85% of the American public not agreeing with the official story over the years. It is amazing, and yet they still will not release the
Well,
documents.
isn't it amazing though? That doesn't surprise me because, putting it in a modern context, net neutrality is something about 90% of the United States believes in, but they're still going to kill it.
Yeah, but
So that doesn't surprise me too much.
no, and it doesn't. And the whole reason is this: we are not in control.
There was a study done recently that said the U.S. is no longer a democracy, but an oligarchy controlled by the rich.
And we were certainly never meant to be a democracy anyway. People misunderstand that.
No, we were a republic.
We were supposed to be a democratically represented republic. And we are not that at this point, because even the people that we do ostensibly elect, even though I contend that most of the time they are simply selected to represent us.
Yeah, in the case of Barack Obama, there's plenty of evidence that he was selected.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
The Harry Lennox interview where he said, I gave Barack Obama acting lessons in the 80s to act more presidential. The trading cards that were released in the 90s showing Barack Obama as president.
Well, even the election of George W. Bush, you don't have to go very far to find voter fraud in history.
No, you don't.
Simple.
It's so easy.
And in fact, in the electronic age, it's very simple. It's actually gotten a lot easier, because they can completely mislead the masses to misunderstand how it is that, you can't find two people that voted for a guy, but yet he got the office. And meanwhile, when he does get into the office, he can't actually accomplish any of the things that he said he was going to accomplish, whether he really wants to or not. So whether he's a liar or he's honest, it's really irrelevant, because he can't do anything anyway.
Well, both presidents lied. Obama said, "I will not kill net neutrality," and then, according to modern statistics now, he's totally in favor of killing net neutrality. He, in fact, placed the guy leading the FCC, who's, by the way, a former Verizon lobbyist, to kill net neutrality.
This is true, and you don't have to go any further than what I'm about to say here. During the first presidential run of Barry Obama, there we have these statements coming out that he was going to allow our government to be the most transparent in history.
And that's a joke now.
That is a complete joke, because under Obama we have had more pieces of paper classified than in the previous, 6 administrations or something.
And not to mention the NSA scandal.
Well, yeah, which is not much of a scandal to me, because I knew in the mid-'90s that this is what their plan was.
Well, of course. But to the general public, including me in that, I got woken up by that.
Well, all that's happened realistically since the mid-'90s is that the idea of spying on the American public has now been automated a bit more than it used to be. There used to be the need for what they called signals analysts in the NSA. They would sit down and they would analyze, listen to, wiretap, and constantly go into conversations, emails, everything, faxes, you name it. Any form of communication was being monitored by the NSA previous to this anyway.
Of course, there are reports out that they monitored Martin Luther King Jr.
Well, that was the FBI we're talking about there.
Okay. I must be incorrect on a fact there, because I thought I read that.
Well, it lends itself to the same kind of thing, because the FBI and the domestic, at that time, security apparatus was well involved in spying on U.S. citizens. But at that time,
9/11 brought all of this.
Oh, no, 9/11 didn't begin any of it.
No.
See, that is the excuse. That is the excuse to explain what already existed.
Well, no, not necessarily. Can I counter that?
Go ahead.
9/11 brought in two major things. The Patriot Act, subsequently the NDAA, of
Mhm.
2012 and the TSA airport security.
That's fine, but what it really is the excuse for the public to accept what
Of-
was already being constructed.
I am not denying that.
And these apparatus, as you did note very well, were already in play when it came to the FBI and domestic surveillance by the CIA, which, by the way, according to their official charter, they are not supposed to participate in. You have no further to look than their charter, which was formed at their inception, where they were not permitted to operate on U.S. soil, and they do.
Of course.
There was an
But that
entire.
was.
Go ahead.
But I think that was obvious that that's what they were doing.
Well, yeah, when we found out later that the largest CIA station on the planet was in Florida, and it was a place called J.M. Wade, ostensibly created to support and monitor the pro and anti-Castro Cubans, which were such a huge concern that we needed to deal with that so badly, because at that time they were what we called the terrorists. In fact,
can I bring up a couple points? I'm sorry to cut you off again.
No problem.
I
Go
do
ahead.
that a lot, I guess.
No, I'd rather you cut me off. I don't want to just run my mouth the whole time, please.
But TSA, as James and I are typing back and forth, James mentioned this to me, that TSA's never caught anybody. And TSA never caught a single terrorist or criminal. All they do is mess with innocent civilians, stop them from getting on planes, strip them, and in a lot of cases molest them, and in a few rare cases, I think, rape them.
Well, I don't know about those particular allegations. I do know, factually that they ripped off colostomy bags off of people and have absolutely molested individuals, whilst ostensibly searching them. And yeah, to the best of my knowledge, not a single terrorist has been caught by that entire apparatus. But, I think that's missing the point of what the actual purpose of the TSA is.
Oh, I know what the purpose is, but I'm talking about in the official light. They haven't fulfilled their duty.
Oh, of course not. Why would they?
But the other one, the other point I wanted to bring up is.
Well, I'm curious if Chris has anything to add to this.
Chris.
Okay, well, honestly, throughout this whole thing, I've just sort of been following and taking my own notes on this, because when I was first told that, here we go, 9/11, I wasn't really thinking of how in depth you would go with all the politics and how far you would go back. So up to this point, I've just been taking notes for future reference.
Okay, well, you know what? Do me a favor, Chris. Tell me what it. Yeah, man, I'm sure we've missed some things that you wanted to cover. So, what do you got? What is it that you want to cover about 9/11? I mean, bring us back to it, because.
Yeah, we need someone to.
Yeah, because I can go on forever and put these things into context and explain to you how it works with so many different situations back and forth in history, that it all makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, I mainly do this to explain to people, because they say, well, that just seems too crazy. That seems too evil. Well,
yeah, I had somebody bring that argument forward with me a couple times, that nobody's that evil.
If you consider the other evils that have already been committed and admitted, it's really not that outrageous.
You only need two things to figure out that it's not a stretch for George Bush and Dick Cheney to have done anything.
Well, it's not a stretch for the American government, because a lot of people have a problem with the American government or the American government's apparatuses to have participated in all sorts of evil acts. It's like, well, we don't do things like that.
Well,
yes, we do. Historically, absolutely proven, no matter what source you turn to. The only difference here is the severity.
And
I call it a genocide. They call it a war, even though it was never declared a war.
You can bring up two different.
They call it collateral damage.
You can bring up two or three different points we already brought up. The absolute genocide of Afghani citizens, the backing of Joseph Stalin murdering his own citizens, and Gulf of Tonkin.
Right.
We've done so many evil things in our history, and two out of those three, if I'm not mistaken, were committed in a what's the word I'm looking for? A sequence.
Well, there is sequential value to all this stuff, but my point about it is that in modern history, it is very easy to draw a continuous line from, we'll just take the past 50 years. If you begin there, you can draw a continuous line where it's almost as if we have never been uninvolved in the propagation of this stuff.
We've
Yeah.
been involved in just about, I say just about because I'm sure there's one or two I'm going to miss, just about every conflict in the world. We have had some involvement either in the provocation of the war or the backing of the war.
Well, now I don't think that's entirely fair. There are plenty of organically created situations, which Chris brought up earlier about, sometimes civil wars are just civil wars.
Right.
And it is true.
I'm just talking, well, even the civil wars we back the freedom fighters usually, the quote-unquote freedom fighters.
Well, we used to back the anti-communist regimes.
Right.
And that was ostensibly our reason for doing so. But you can go all the way back to our adventures in World War II. How it is we essentially provoked the Japanese to attack at Pearl Harbor.
Oh, yeah, we stopped trading with them, and they became desperate.
Well, we cut off their fuel. After allowing the fuel to go in there, then we cut it off. And there's a whole history to that, and I advise you to study how DuPont behaved during that time period. And look for yourself. We did not step into World War II accidentally or for some great moral crusade.
But another point to bring up, I'm sorry again, I keep doing that.
It's okay. It's okay. But I want to get back to where we started with Chris and with 9/11 again. That's the only thing I want to get back.
Well, this point goes to that. When we're talking about these wars and how we fund them, and how we back them, I'd like to bring up an interesting connection. Dick Cheney, I believe, was the CEO or the vice president of Halliburton before he became vice president of the United States.
Yeah, that's true.
And so he had a logistical benefit to it. I'm sure they paid him for what he did for Halliburton. He made their stock rise 5 times.
Well, right, but I mean, the entire Bush administration is rife with people that benefited because they had serious interest in all sorts of companies that were in support of military and logistical support for military assets and the rebuilding of places, the preparation for airstrips, the remodification of previously existing structures in foreign lands. I mean, the airports, you name it. There's just plenty of actual good financial traceable tracks for these guys to have benefited.
And if you want to bring up an even more modern example of these things, the U.S., I'm sure you guys are hearing about Boko Haram right now.
Mm-hmm.
They're, as far as I can see, backed by us in some way.
The northern part of Nigeria.
Yes, Boko Haram, the terrorist organization.
Right, which has most famously made news recently because of the abduction of the girls, and we're going to sell these women and all that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be surprised if they were backed by us in some way.
No, I wouldn't either, but I'm reserving judgment on that because I still haven't seen enough to really even fully understand where these guys came from and what's going on with them.
There was a report out earlier today about Boko Haram being a CIA op.
Well, again, it's not inconceivable because, like I said...
And James just told me that we pay for their weapons.
Totally believable again because we have this sort of, bipolar sort of support of these assets throughout the world. I mean, I brought it up through the conversation about the drug propagation on the planet, basically, where we criminalize on the one hand and shun and shame nations for participating in drug trafficking, and meanwhile we are participating, either directly or indirectly in that same trafficking.
And we're
So-
sending troops in, so that's suspicious. Why are we sending troops into northern Nigeria to fight Boko Haram? The country's not at war. We have no business being there. They haven't killed anybody yet that I know of.
Well,
So-
again, I don't know how that label relates to the reality on the ground. This is what my problem is. But it's still, we're getting away from the 9/11 thing and still not letting Chris talk. So
We're sorry. I'm sorry again, Chris. I keep doing it. I keep interrupting everybody.
I apologize too, because I can talk forever. This is why I do radio.
It's a good reason. So, back on the main topic, I suppose, about 9/11. Early, way early in the show, we went over different scenarios of what could have happened or what could have caused all the buildings to fall. We talked about the different what is the word I'm thinking of? Like relationship between Osama and the Al Qaeda with the U.S. government. Do you think that Bush saw it coming? Like, do you think he planned for it?
Well,
In an overall broad topic.
to say that Bush planned for it is a stretch, because which Bush are we talking about, first of all?
The one that was in power when it happened.
Okay, W, to say that he planned for it himself, I don't want to give him that much credit.
No, I don't think he could have. He's, in all
Well,
honesty, George
I
George
wouldn't say
W.
planned, but do you think he was knowledgeable?
I
that something
think
like
he
that
was
going to happen?
knowledgeable, but
Again, that's a bit of a stretch.
but I mean, to say that he planned it, let's be honest, George W. really was an idiot in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I knew that much about.
I don't think he could have planned. I don't want to give him too much credit now.
Right.
I just planned on saying this as an opening for what I'm heading towards. So,
Go ahead.
Did you hear, listen, or watch, read about the speech that he gave to 2001 about the incident when he was blamed?
You're talking about not to believe conspiracy theories, that whole deal?
Well, more importantly, the one that Osama gave about how it could have just been some acting on their own.
Well,
Politicians are made to write speech. Well, politicians are made to say speeches. I mean,
Yeah, but
okay.
directly after the incident, though, Osama, we already covered the fact that
I think he was.
Go ahead.
I think he was too calm after the event. He went up there and he seemed perfectly fine. He seemed like he had no shock.
Well, if you look at every speech that he's done, he's like that in everything. There was
Right.
even an interview that somebody had with him, apparently.
Yeah, but you would think. Now I'm just thinking. You would think that a guy who just had his country bombed and had thousands dead would be a little more shocked that it happened on his watch.
Well, look, in all fairness, bin Laden had no control over the Afghani government.
I'm not
Okay?
talking about bin Laden, I'm talking about Bush.
Oh, I thought we were discussing bin Laden and his statements.
That's what I was.
Oh, sorry, I guess I got lost.
Maybe, because he started out talking about Bush and his statements, and then switched to bin Laden and his statements.
Okay,
So,
I guess I was a bit behind.
no problem. But
But with-
here's
Okay.
the context with with Bin Laden's statements and as they were released. Okay, a lot of people forget that this stuff was being released by this Middle Eastern news organization, which was called Al Jazeera, which we now know a whole lot better now, huh?
Yeah.
They were getting tapes supposedly delivered to them by couriers. That came out later that a lot of these tapes had pre-existed the 9/11 situation, and we again take clips and things out of context, and I think that has become a real mess as far as the historical timeline here. So when you're passing judgments on any statements that seem to be released at particular times involving Bin Laden, I think that you have to analyze the source and you have to really try to put them in their proper chronological order, because it's very noticeable in those statements that there are certain things happening there that seem really strange. Like some of those statements, he appears a bit younger than he should. He's not quite as haggard, which is part of the point I think Dylan was trying to make about some of this, where you can't see that he's stressed out or anything like that. I know you were making the point about Bush, but here's the thing. If he had just gotten through being, attacked, chased down, and become the most wanted man on the planet, you might think that he would have a little bit of an intensity to him that was not present during those statements. Now, again, this is all questionable, even coming from me, because I am not an analyst of the Arabic language. Also, I have never seen the uncut versions of these tapes, ever. And the statements being given to us at that time were that they did not want to release things contemporaneous with the timeline. They did not want to air things in the United States immediately because they were worried that there might be encoded attack messages in them and things like this. There is a lot of nonsense and propaganda about those statements. And I question and challenge anybody to put them in their proper chronological order to begin with.
That'll be difficult.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I do understand how you're saying how he appeared younger in some, and they could have been pre-recorded.
I think they were absolutely pre-recorded.
All right. Well, there was one released in 2004. Directly, like this was where he admitted that he was, I don't want to say mastermind, but I'll say like he was behind the attack. If that was so, do you find it at all suspicious that it was very, very close to the election date for the U.S.?
I find a lot of things convenient about that election. Okay. People have forgotten this now, but the color-coded threat level meter was introduced into the American populace's psychology at that time. And we had these raises of threats because there may be something happening somewhere at some time, and it may be terrorist-related. Okay? We were going from yellow to orange to purple to, and you know what? When you want to distract, the feeble-minded, it's very easy to put up bright colors and shiny things and plenty of moving images and fascinating characterizations on the television screen, because that does serve to distract us all. And I think that the entire Bin Laden releases of tapes, the context, the translations, the overall mood of the nation, the sort of angst that was then interjected into our psychology is really more of a study of mind control than the historical facts.
Right, and James just brought up a point to me on Facebook. He says a man on dialysis can't travel far or live in a cave.
Yeah, these things are kind of difficult, aren't they? James ought to come on.
I'll ask. But he says everyone's in his house is sick. But
Okay.
I'll ask him if he wants to come on. If he wants to come
please.
on, I'd be happy to have him come on. because he could say these things a lot better than I could and illustrate his points a lot better than I can illustrate them for him.
We are talking about James Impending from NWO Truth Radio, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
I asked him how the show was, and he's been following it for just about the whole time, I believe.
Oh, cool. Good guy. I really like James.
Yeah, he's helped me out a lot with my shows. Before we were an official network, and when I was just doing hour-long podcasts, he was my co-host for all of them.
Well, you know, that's exactly how it is that I got in touch with you, is through James, because he had mentioned that you wanted to cover a few topics I had a little bit of knowledge on, so I was...
You have a lot more
glad to do
knowledge
so.
than I do in general, so glad we got you to come on.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to come on, and I'm more than happy to lend my voice to you anytime. It's just that, I hope that I've at least given anybody who is listening, the opportunity to begin to look at these things from a different angle, because I will not say that the alternative media or the new media doesn't lie to you on occasion or all the time. I won't say
some
that
of them.
because I see the evidence for it. But the mainstream, I guarantee you, is lying to you constantly.
Sometimes in the mainstream and alternative, by mainstream, in this case I mean Fox, have Obama derangement syndrome. They always think he's involved, even if the evidence isn't there. They always find some little string to connect him.
That's true.
Oh yeah, and if you want the flip side of that, you just tune into MSNBC and you find out that that Savior Obama does no wrong also. So
Yeah. Well, if you turn on CNN, you find out that nobody's right and nobody's wrong.
But they're still looking for the plane. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, they mention it. There was a study. They mention it once every 6 minutes.
Yeah, that was a couple of weeks ago, but it's gone down a little bit. But they're still doing it.
It's honestly hilarious.
I am astounded that they've been able to maintain it this long.
Well,
I really am.
To be fair, we were talking off air about the Warren Commission and the Jack Ruby's mom's teeth. Well, the equivalent to that in modern context is MSNBC talking about the MH370's pilot's favorite coffee.
Almost. Although, here's the thing, though, is that his coffee may have affected his flying. That's a possibility. Look, if he's jacked up with caffeine and he can't think straight because he's
they
it's
did.
A possibility.
They did talk about it for an hour.
Well, I'm not saying that an hour needs to be invested, but I mean, at least it could be remotely relevant. For God's sake. I mean, Jack Ruby's mother wasn't even there. Here's the point. I know I've made this before on other shows, but I'm going to do it again. In the Warren Commission volumes, there is literally pages of it devoted to the study of Jack Ruby's mother's teeth in the 1940s, okay? It is part of the official record. Now, Jack Ruby, for those who don't know, is the guy who killed Lee Harvey Oswald on live TV.
With a gun, not biting him to death.
With a gun. His mother is not present? Where does this come into relevance? There is no relevance to it. But the coffee, I could make an argument. Look, if the guy's jacked up on way too much caffeine, drinking Moco Loco, okay, maybe that's got something to do with the way he flew the plane. But, so it's a lot worse now.
That's great, but I could counter that argument with, okay, for maybe an hour or two or even a day, but not 2 months.
Oh, sure, but they didn't talk about the coffee for 2 months. I mean...
no, I'm not saying that... No, I'm saying the coffee wouldn't have affected him for 2 months. Eventually he would have been able to fly back.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. You never know.
I honestly, and I've said this before too, I just think that that plane was destroyed, whether accidentally or intentionally, and I don't think we're going to see the pieces of that plane until they're ready to produce them.
Yeah, they'll produce the pieces to the plane when the U.S. bombs Ukraine.
That could be a convenient way to handle it, or maybe they'll just say that, a Boko Haram guy with a shoulder-fired missile took it down. I don't know. Whatever's convenient at the time, whenever they need that particular prop, I think that's when we'll see the wreckage. And that's about the end of the story until such time as they decide to produce it on the world stage and create another distraction for something. So, again, we've flown way off the 9/11 topic. And Chris, go ahead. I know you got to have something else you wanted to add in or question here.
Actually, not really. Everything I have is all opinion based.
Oh, we'd love to hear your opinion.
Opinions?
No. It's not my opinion. It's questioning your opinion.
Okay. Well,
go ahead.
Question it.
Well, it was about like the different conspiracies that we've talked about. I'm going back to a very bland and just open topic. It's not really in depth in any way, but about the different conspiracies. Do you just openly believe that this was just fully planned as a terrorist attack by Al Qaeda? Or do you believe that the U.S. did have something to do with it? This is as basic as it gets.
I think it's impossible for the U.S. to at least not have known, but as for involvement, that's up in the air, I think.
See, but that's what we've been passing around this whole time. I just want to know, in your opinion, if you have an opinion or if you just plan to leave it a mystery.
Well, there are a lot of mysteries that we wouldn't be able to solve.
Oh, yeah. There's lots of information that we don't have and that we probably will never know.
Well, Chris, I'll tell you this. It boils down to essentially this, in my opinion, and I do borrow this from some of the very early conferences on 9/11. I'm not the only person to ever say this, and again, I'm probably going to anger some people that'll hear this later.
No, good.
But here's the bottom line. In my opinion, we have a situation where there is no way that this entire scenario could have been acted out without at least the complicity of elements of the U.S. government. The fact is that we have either what they call the LIHOP or MIHOP problem here, which is either that it was let it happen on purpose or made it happen on purpose problem. It appears as though it is far too convenient to have been occurring right previous to us involving ourselves in so many military and other adventures in the Middle East. It seems to be a way too convenient an excuse. But that aside, the actual mechanics of the scenario, the actual occurrences themselves, in my opinion, could not have occurred without the complicity or possible participation of individuals within the U.S. government structure one way or another. As far as the particulars there, you can go in many different directions, find many different motives, many different actors, and not necessarily be incorrect, even if they do seem to conflict with one another. Okay, and that goes all the way from the top down. That is not to say that the entire apparatus of the U.S. government was involved here, but at the very least, in my opinion, there had to have been some elements.
All it would take for the U.S. to create an event like that, logistically, in terms of people needed, it would realistically probably take about half a dozen.
Well, that and it would take them, they would have to be in pretty good positions of authority in order to create the types of confusion, failures, and otherwise, conflagration of difficulties that occurred to allow it to happen, which would be the let it happen on purpose sort of scenario.
Oh, and those people that probably knew about it, to throw out a few names, I assume the director of the CIA would have known.
Well, not necessarily, and I'll say this. I wouldn't necessarily hang it on the director of the CIA simply because they have the title of director does not necessarily mean that they are in control of even a remotely significant amount of that agency.
I think Dick Cheney and George Bush had to have at least known. And I think it's impossible for Dick Cheney not to have manipulated the situation.
Well, Cheney has made a career out of manipulating situations, so that would be completely consistent with his character. As far as W knowing what was going on, I hesitate to say for certain that he did.
He was too calm for me.
To have actively participated in it after the fact, to have benefited from it, his family did for certain. I'm sure he did directly. I'm sure many people did. But to have prior knowledge is a little bit of a stretch. And I'm being conservative here.
NORAD.
Well, yeah. I mean, but there you go. That is, again, assuming that W had any sort of real knowledge of what NORAD did or anything else.
Oh, we're not assuming. I'm not really assuming that George Bush had knowledge. I think he might have, but I almost think it's impossible for either the president or the vice president to not have known prior. And one of them knew.
Well, there's plenty of things that occur of significance that the president and the vice president have no knowledge of until after the fact.
Oh,
so I would say that that on in and of itself is not a fair enough statement. But
of this magnitude, on U.S. soil, I think one of them would have known.
It seems likely, but I don't think it really elevates itself to the level of certainty that would be required for me to agree with that. I'm sorry.
No, I agree. I agree. There's a lot of uncertainty, but just based off of my opinion, at least, I think George Bush was too calm, and I think Dick Cheney would have had too much to benefit from it to not have either known or planned.
Well, opinions are interesting, and I have heard plenty of kooky things related to people's opinions over time on this subject. And I mean, I've even heard that it's a possibility that there was extraterrestrial involvement with the bringing down of the buildings. Okay, and I got it with a straight face. For God's sake,
Chris, you actually joked about that last night.
Yeah, I know. That's because I was reading and I read something about that, so I decided to joke about it.
Yeah, but you know, when you get down to it, I mean,
there's nothing to back that up.
Well, yeah, and that's the funny part, is that when you tell people that there's absolutely nothing to back, one of these ridiculous scenarios, sometimes they state that is exactly why it is so believable, because the evidence is not there.
James.
Like I told you, like I told you recently, it reminds me of that cartoon where the Samuel L. Jackson voiced character says, the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. So,
That popped into my mind as soon as you said it.
Exactly, and look, simply because I cannot prove that tall white aliens demolished the Twin Towers does not mean that that's proof that it happened. And because I can't prove that directed energy weapons were not being beamed from across the country to hit the place or whatever else, this kind of speculation, to me, it may be interesting from an academic standpoint in some degree, and it may be entertaining, but it gets us away from the reality. And the reality is this. I've even heard people claim that no one died on 9/11.
That's ridiculous.
That is a ridiculous thing. I've heard people claim that nothing struck the towers. I believe that is absolutely
more plausible,
ridiculous.
But still ridiculous.
Exactly. We're dealing with an extremely insane, sort of reach for explanations here. And I told you I've experienced this firsthand with the JFK assassination. I mean, I've had people try and tell me that Jackie was involved in his murder. That she actually pulled the trigger on a small gun under his chin. Okay, that an explosive device was actually placed in the seat that back there and therefore blew off the back of his head.
Oh, come on.
listen, man, I have had people tell me with a straight face that this is the reality of what happened. And I tried to explain to you that the whole concept of the limo driver having turned around and shot him in the face is just as ridiculous, but I guarantee you there are plenty of people out there that will fight with me tooth and nail that that is the reality of what happened.
Oh, yeah, you kind of proved to me that that was ridiculous. You actually gave me a clear video to see.
Well, right. I mean, and even if, and there's an argument now in the JFK research community about whether the Zapruder film itself is authentic in any way, shape, or form. All of these things really serve to invest a lot of time and effort into the distraction from the facts as opposed to the search for the facts.
Oh yeah, there's been lots. I've heard several things about 9/11 about how the planes that hit weren't even passenger planes, and there were a few people on board. They were loaded with missiles, and they shot the missiles before they hit the building, so that, I don't know, the plane could go in for further, more damage. I don't know, but I've argued with people where they say that they were cargo planes with weapons that hit the buildings. They weren't the actual other planes.
Actually, that's pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, the only possibility here where I think a passenger plane may have not struck the target that they're talking about, well, two of them actually. Shanksville, Pennsylvania, there's a problem with the amount of debris and everything that was found for a plane to have simply hit the ground and crashed. Okay, and the other problem is the strike at the Pentagon, where I have a very hard time understanding how a passenger plane was able to achieve the acrobatics of that are reported to have been performed by that plane. You know, that in conjunction with the amount of wreckage which was not found on the scene, and with the nature of the initial damage from the strike and everything else, leads me to think that it is possible that that was not a jetliner which struck the Pentagon. Also, the possibility that what went down in Shanksville was not a jetliner containing passengers. But when it comes down to the actual, strikes at the Twin Towers, to say that they were missile-loaded planes and all these other things, again, this seems to me to be more of a distraction than a search for the reality of what occurred. And we could do that endlessly.
Yeah.
And, we could say that there were demons from another dimension that took over the planes and did this too. It's not a problem. I mean, we could argue about the plausibility of that as well.
Well, no, you can't argue about the plausibility of that because there's no plausibility.
Oh, sure there is. Sure there is.
Of demons?
You want me to play that game for a minute? I'll do it.
Actually, yes, I would, because I'd love to see how you spin this one.
Okay. Well, being that there is limited proof for the terrorists to have been on some of those planes, tell me how it is you can deny that a demonic entity could have entered a pilot if you assume that the concept of possession is possible. Then why not some sort of a nebulous demonic entity which wanted us to engage in warfare across the planet and therefore add to the pool of death and misery among mankind?
That's like saying the Easter Bunny was the second shooter in the JFK assassination. It's possible, but extremely unlikely. Certainly almost impossible.
Well, right, but that's a little something called common sense, which a lot of people don't employ.
Yeah, well, I guess to be fair to what we're saying, it's not, compared to some of the other stuff we're expected to believe, demons committing 9/11 isn't the strangest thing I've ever been asked to believe.
There you go. And, one of the strangest things that I was ever asked to believe is that 19 hijackers with box cutters infiltrated cockpits, took over planes, and forced them into buildings.
James is over here saying that demons is quite plausible.
You see, I told you.
That's the one thing that threw me off, is how they did it with box cutter knives.
Oh, never mind.
If they really hijacked the plane with their main weapon being box cutter knives, I'm pretty sure several people could have just got up and started fighting with them. I mean, there were a lot more passengers than actual people that were hijacking, so, I mean, I would have.
Well, see,
I don't know why anyone else did.
I hear you there, but the counter argument, of course, is that you know, in crowdthink mentality and with the fear-based sort of nature of our society and the almost psychological castration of the male being over time here, we have a lot of punks and wimps among us. And there are plenty of people who wouldn't have stood up and would gladly go over the edge of a cliff, just like a herd of cows.
So, to simplify what you said, Chuck, for the people that don't understand what was said, believe me, there are going to be some people that ask me, what did he say? Crowds are stupid. Crowds are generally stupider than when they're alone.
Essentially, they certainly are, because they become dependent upon others to make observations, and a lot of people do freeze in tense situations.
Did you hear? James just messaged me saying some of the hijackers were found alive afterwards. Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, in a few cases, the people that were placed up on the screens and throughout the newspapers throughout the world, and being accused of being the now dead, martyred, whatever you want to call them, terrorists, wound up standing up and basically saying, "Wait a minute, I'm not dead," which was later explained away rather vaguely as you know, minor misidentifications.
Yeah, minor. Don't worry, we just called you an international criminal. Nothing to worry about, though.
Yeah, we just accused you of participating in the murder of 3,000 human beings, but sorry about that. We just must have gotten the pictures mixed up. You know, come on. You know, again, you know, the more that they create false mysteries for us to you know, sit and postulate about, and the more that that you know, the sort of kooky conspiracy theories are supported by those who are searching for a true answer, the more time and effort and energy we waste instead of actually going after the fact.
No, we have to. I disagree a little bit. I think we have to take these wacky ones and debunk them, because they give us, who are doing the real research, a bad name.
See, now that's an interesting argument, but the problem is this. Once those things are, once that Pandora's box is opened and it's out there, believe me, they will tag guys like you and me with the same label as those guys.
Trust me, I know. I've been tagged onto that as well.
Yeah, well, you know. So you think that instead of a guy in a cave planning it with a dialysis machine, an idiot sitting there who couldn't even, you know, make a complete sentence when he gave a speech, who was in the figurehead position of the presidency, well, he planned it all and he did it. What did he do? Fly remote-controlled, you know, planes into the towers himself like it was a video game? I've had that argument stated to my face.
Oh, that would have been funny. I wish somebody would bring that up to us on the show.
Yeah, well,
I wish that would happen. That would be so fun.
But Chris, what else have you got?
I don't know. I think covered everything that I had.
We've actually stayed on topic pretty good this time. We didn't deviate this time around.
Well, you know, I'm trying.
No, you're good. You're good. You're giving good information, even when we're deviating.
You see, with the whole part about how you kept going, actually, I don't know the difference if you were going really off topic or really in depth, but I think this would be good for a Ukraine versus Russia talk about what will happen or what has happened.
I actually did want to talk about that, if you're up for it, Chuck.
Well, you know, I would not claim to be a great expert on the topic.
You don't need to be an expert on the topic, because frankly nobody is at this point. It's still an ongoing event, and it's very young.
it's not based in the States, so I may actually talk a lot.
Well, I've got no problem with that. I can certainly add some of it, but something to it.
And James says hi to you, Chuck.
Hey, James.
He told me to say it before we stopped the show.
James Impending, really great guy. I think I mentioned that before.
You did.
Yeah. So I'm glad you're listening. And
and James seemingly wants to join us for the Ukraine show.
That would be great, because I'd love to hear what he's got to say, and
I
would love to hear a few different voices on this, actually.
I've got a voice on it, and I'm
Actually,
sure Chris does, because
me and Dylan has already debated about the Ukraine and Russia thing before.
Well, really briefly, let me ask you this, because to me this bears very little relation to the topic that we've covered today, but when you take a look at the way that Putin is acting over there, and you take a look at the situation as it is, I mean, thus far my opinion has been that we really are sticking our noses into a place that we don't belong, and really honestly we're kicking the fence at a vicious dog that we think has a fence there that'll protect us from him. I think we're honestly straying into areas that could instantly blow up into something that none of the controllers on our side of the poker table here have an idea about exactly how bad it can get.
James wants to join us right now if you'll welcome him on.
I'm all for it. Chris?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. He's getting his headphones. So,
Okay.
Yeah, sorry to keep cutting you off. I just wanted to let you know he was joining in.
Not a problem. More than happy. But as I said, it seems to me as though, again, the United States is screwing around with something it doesn't even understand. I don't see how it is that we are supposed to, as a nation, benefit from this. I think that this is still the argument over the old Warsaw Pact, nations versus the NATO alliance, which was not supposed to continuously expand as it did. And that is more of the mainstream kind of elements that we can examine. But the truth, the actual motives for what's going on, I think have yet to be revealed. So that's my opinion so far, and it's a very cursory sort of view of it.
I think like that too. It's like conspiracies are all we can talk and debate about. We can easily debate what can happen, but there's several that bring up good points. I don't really know if we will ever have access to the information about what actually happened, but I'm sure bits and pieces may be released in the future, but I'm sure that it'll be long enough where people just stop caring.
Well,
so
right.
I don't really know if it will ever actually be fully released about what happened.
Right, and I think this also, the conjunction of the the mainstream narrative that's been presented, some of the alternative narratives that have been presented about the situation, the actual fact of what went on in Crimea already, and whoa,
James, what? James, what's that?
I think James is extremely noisy.
Yeah, I just cut it off. I'm sorry, fellas. I had to cancel one thing. I was listening, and then when you Skyped me, I had to get. Running Windows 8.1 is terrible when you're trying to run 5 or 6 things on 6 different screens.
But to put it in context, like I was saying, what I understand also from those two narratives, and by speaking to people who are actually there, is that when you're looking at the Ukraine and you're looking at the recent situation in Crimea, you're looking at Russians who want to join the Russian Federation. And I still have no clue as to why it is that the United States needs to involve itself where it doesn't belong. That's really what I see. In addition to that, I also believe that there was probably plenty of that provocateur type movement that's going on, throughout the world, as we were discussing earlier, Dylan. But I don't understand the purpose of it for our involvement. Why the world actually cares about this stuff is beyond me, because it is no direct threat at this point in time to the European Union. It'll make the borders a little more tense with the NATO nations, but outside of that, I just don't see why it's any of our damn business.
Chris, are you good to continue, or do you need a break for a bit? Because we can keep going. I don't know if you guys want to start another show immediately after, but Chris just messaged me and said he wants to take a small break. So if me and Chuck, James, want to start another show and just talk about it for a while, we can do that. Or if you want to keep on the same show, I don't mind. I'm good.
I just suggested it because it's a completely different topic.
Well, we can always go back in, Dylan, and change the description of the show.
Yeah, we can
and add to it. So it's not a big deal if you want to continue, and we can do up to 8 straight hours on this channel. So.
Yeah, I'm fine with continuing. Chris, can you just come back in like 15 minutes or so? If you want to take a break.
I don't think it'd take that long for a break, but...
Okay, whenever you want to come back, just message me and come back.
Well, look, just mute yourself, Chris. Just mute yourself on your end, and when you're ready to come back in, just unmute yourself and pop right back in.
That's not the thing. I just don't want to miss anything.
Well, just if you want to stop talking for a bit or whatever you want to do. If you want to mute, that's cool. If you want to stay, that's great too.
All right, let's just go on with it.
If I didn't have final preparations to do for my show tonight, I would gladly stay on the whole 8 hours.
And we're not gonna be able to do this for 8 hours.
Chuck and I could.
That's the thing. I was just gonna say. I know James and I could carry for 8 hours.
And I've got enough commercials over here to take breaks if I had to go.
Well, then turn on those commercials in between, and we can stay. You and me, we can stay on for 8 hours if you really want to.
Oh no, I'm not going to make it 8. I've got a show tonight as well that I have to prepare for. But on this Ukraine, I mean, everybody throws their hands up like this is some abomination. A lot of people forget the Ukraine used to be the capital of Russia. It is not that it was never part of Russia. When Russia fell, all these countries were changing their names every other day. The Ukraine stayed the same. Crimea is where Russia's going to hang out until they decide it's time to move.
Well, they're already...
I am with Chuck. I have no business in the Ukraine or Crimea. If those people want to fight or if they need help, they need to petition NATO or petition the UN and say, look, we don't want this, and these people are forcing this upon us, and we need help.
Can I ask a question for you, James?
See, that's the thing. That hasn't come out right yet, and we do have an agreement with the Ukraine on the table which states that if they do request it, we have to offer them financial assistance. Right. Now, that I understand. And if that's the case, you know what? Write them another check because we're printing the money constantly anyway. Go ahead. It's the same thing. And it's not as though we don't do that in nation states all over the planet. So this is not ridiculous, but you are exactly correct that the Ukraine was the capital, and that's where it was previous to Moscow. Okay, and we're talking about the Soviet Union. What we're really seeing here is the reconstitution again of what was the broken Soviet Union. Absolutely. Except now they're calling it the Russian Federation. And I see no reason why this is any of our business.
Well, can I ask a question, James?
Sure, brother.
Do you think that Putin in any way is trying to restart the Soviet Union?
Oh, absolutely right. If he's a man of any kind of Russian background, which we all know, he's very, very He'd spit in your face before he'd shake your hand if he didn't like you. I mean, that's just how those people are. And yes, if he has any gumption at all and wants to be on the world scale, yes, the only way to regain power on the world scale is to form a federation.
Well, then let me
form
ask you a question.
a Soviet Union, so to speak. Yes, I believe that is the major plan. These are minor steps that are being taken to test the waters.
Well, then can I follow up?
Oh, absolutely.
Because in the formerly Soviet Union, Estonia was part of it, and as you know, Estonia is a currently NATO country.
Well, absolutely. That's why I said that we're doing, not we, excuse me, they're doing their testing on places that are right beside them, number one. Number two, though, and this is probably more key for our involvement, we have to send things halfway around the world. Russia has to send them a couple 100 miles. It's going to take us at least a year to build up enough to be able to adequately repel borders with these people.
I agree with your point, but
that is a good point.
But
tactically speaking, guys, the thing is also very, and I'm glad you brought this up, James. The fact is that if you even look at, we brought up World War II earlier. If you look at the first incursions of the German army into other nations and the annexation of other places, their first targets were places which were historically theirs to begin with.
Correct.
Their first targets were places that wanted them to come in. This wasn't necessarily an unwanted invasion, and Crimea was basically begging for the Russians to come in.
That's right.
Because they not only shared, a population which is majority their people anyway, but also they wanted back in basically with what was the Soviet Union.
that's
their
all.
adventure, Estonia did not. So that is definitely something that's on the back burner for him.
But my question is, if Russia, in the end, if Estonia does say they want to become part of Russia, considering Estonia as a NATO country, do you think it is any of our business as a member of NATO to say no to Russia from taking a NATO country?
Absolutely not. Number one, first and foremost, you don't send somebody who is halfway around the world to save somebody who is right next door. If Europe is also part of NATO, if it's that big a deal, why isn't Great Britain and the armies of Europe mounting up to go over here and stop this man? Why is it always the United States having to be the right hand of the military force of NATO and the UN? Why are we always sending our sons and daughters to go fight wars that have nothing to do with us so that other people will want to join in?
Well, I think the argument that they'd use is they want us to lead by example, but the argument that I'd like to use for that, and I don't agree with it, mind you, the argument I'd use for why we're doing it is because everyone else, UK and all them, are seemingly they don't want to do it, but because of NATO agreements, if the US goes in, then the NATO countries have to back it.
When the EU was being discussed as a concept before they started to unify, okay, the fear actually that was sort of propagated by those who theorized about it was that we were going to be faced with another superpower which was going to be much larger and have a much greater amount of resources than ourselves. And it is a good point to say that they would be the ones responsible for controlling a situation like if it did arrive in Estonia, if it was being forced upon the populace. But here's what's missing from that whole discussion is that if a nation state, if a sovereign nation decides that they wish to switch their alliances, it would not be the first time in history.
No, but do you think we would take very kindly to that? And do you think we would respond by force?
But again, why is it our business?
Yeah.
This is the thing.
I
don't understand.
I agree that it's not our business. I wanted to get your opinion on it, but do you think that we would at least have some reason on the world stage, at least in the minds of world leaders and
Well, see,
people like the EU.
That's an entirely different question. If the excuse can be made for us to interject ourselves into that situation according to the the political sort of mindset at the time, that's a possibility. But the realistic, actual achievable goals or actual, concept of us defending our supposed allies is ludicrous if that nation decides that they don't want to be part of it anymore.
I agree with you, but I'm just saying the argument can be made.
Well, but see, the argument can be made. The argument can be made. Here's the problem with those arguments, okay? Remember, we were supposed to go into Iraq because, somebody had weapons of mass destruction, right?
Correct.
We were supposed to go into Iraq because, oh my, he has gassed and bombed his own people. These are the excuses that are made.
Oh, I know they give excuses, and I know a lot of them are blown out of proportion for a reason.
My point about that is this, that an excuse can be made out of anything.
Oh, of course, I agree with that.
All we have to use is the concept on the world stage that we are defending the human rights of those who cannot defend themselves, which has been part of the American doctrine for quite a while.
Well,
absolutely right.
Following that,
the doctors who go and heal the people who can't be healed, and I am so sick of the half-staff flags and the half-assed speeches. I'm so sorry for cussing.
I don't care.
We are the world babysitter. The elite pull our string, and we send our sons and daughters to go die in other places. And let me also say this. When you decide that you are going to join the military and then your country decides that you're going to fight for the UN, if you die in Crimea fighting for the UN and you were a United States Marine, you don't even get your benefits, your military burial. They don't even have to send you home. They can leave you there. Now you tell me why our people should be over there giving up their lives, being denied their rights, being denied their benefits, family members not even told the correct stories about these things. But we sit as a people, as a nation, and say, "Oh no, it's okay. Just do whatever y'all feels best."
I'm glad you brought up the story, because how many times has that been? How many times have they gotten the story wrong? We've seen it twice in the last 5 years with Benghazi and SEAL Team 6.
Yeah, and we still believe them every time they come out and say breaking news.
Yeah. Look, you don't even have to go to those events with Benghazi and SEAL Team 6. I challenge you to just get a sampling of the stories which have been told to military families over the past 50 years. Okay, you'll find all kinds of inconsistencies, lack of explanation, lack of respect being paid to these individuals who paid with their lives, or at least we believe they paid with their lives because they were never returned home. Okay, This is something that is systemic throughout, and I agree with James entirely that I am sick and tired of this. I am through with hearing about this nonsense because there is no reason why blood should be spilled. Okay.
So let me ask another question.
Sure.
I'm sorry again for interrupting. I keep doing it.
It's your show, man. Do it.
If you guys say you're tired of being the world's babysitter, and I agree with that point. I'm tired of it too. But would you at all support any action against North Korea for doing what Germany and Soviet Russia did in their last times?
Well, what are they doing like Soviet Germany and Russia exactly?
Well, they're putting their people into labor camps and killing them.
There are people in concentration camps. There are people who are tortured and murdered on a daily basis all over the planet.
Oh, I know.
In my opinion, the largest open-air concentration camp in the world exists in a place called Palestine, okay?
Correct.
And I have no dog in that fight. at this point, except to say that if we were needing to get ourselves involved in the largest numerical problem, the slaughter of Christians there, and I'm going to qualify this really quickly. I am not a Christian, okay, but I do not support the slaughter of Christians and others in the state of Palestine.
No.
Okay. This type of thing is not just there. I mean, you can find, the constant abuses of populations all over the planet. So.
Oh, I know. I'm agreeing with you on that.
We don't have enough human beings to mobilize to involve ourselves in all the situations that are unfolding as we speak.
Well, I mean, but what I meant by would you support any action in North Korea? Any, not just military, economic, sanction them. Would you support any of that action?
Well, economic sanctions are a joke. Okay.
Strong economic sanctions, not the weak things that we're putting on Russia.
And economic sanctions, again, if we were to economically sanction every government that did things like this, we would have nobody to do business with at all.
And that's right. And let's not forget, and I'm sorry to cut you off.
It's okay.
We operate under two sets of laws in this world. One is the civil law, which is why you're known as a civilian, because you are under civil law. But when you're dealing with countries, the law of the land when it comes to the world is called the UCC.
I thought it was called the Geneva
Commercial Code.
I thought it was the Geneva Convention.
No. The Geneva Convention states what you can and cannot do in the act of war. What you cannot do to people.
Which that one's a joke, because how many times have we violated that in the last century?
The only part of the Geneva Convention that is ever held up is tracer fire in large weapons, so that the enemy can see where the fire is coming from. That's the only part of the Geneva Convention I've ever seen held up. But back to the UCC, it's called the Uniform Commercial Code, and that is what ensures that every country plays on the same level playing field, so that when I send something to China, being a quote-unquote Christian nation, and they are a communist nation, and they get their goods, and they just say, okay, well, we're done, we're not going to pay you, and that's how the world comes down. It is like the UN for commerce. You violate that, and you cut yourself off from the rest of the world. And
right. That's sort of a sense of engagement for business, so that one country can't just take delivery on goods or services or something like that and just stiff another. Because if you have that sort of thing happening without any recourse, then what is to stop everybody from basically robbing everybody else? I mean, that's ostensibly what it's for.
Absolutely.
I'm agreeing with you, but the question, the statement I was gonna make in the end was about the Geneva Convention. It's, like you said, never held up. I mean, we nuked Japan. We used Agent Orange in Vietnam. We used chemical weapons in Iraq.
We use chemical weapons to this very day. We're still shooting white phosphorus in Afghanistan.
Right, and you don't even need to go that drastic to find the sort of inconsistent following of the Geneva Convention. I mean, even just the standard by which ammunition is created, and I don't mean any of this fancy stuff. I'm talking about just bullets. Bullets are supposed to be designed with full metal jackets, so that they don't fragment when they hit a person, so that they're generally used as projectiles that will pass through an individual.
Right.
And things like this to prevent cruelty to soldiers, between soldiers shooting at each other. And this stuff is not even observed anymore. The type of munitions that are being used, I mean, the depleted uranium, do you think that stuff is not inconsistent with the Geneva Convention?
I think just about everything we use is.
Right. I mean, and the acceptable terminology of collateral damage at this point, we are not supposed to engage with battle. Any military assets and from any country are not supposed to engage with battle with civilian populations.
That's right. Schools and hospitals.
You got it. And that is why there are those large red crosses on the tops of hospitals, so that they can't be bombed from the air.
And when people say, oh, they're not that evil, referring to like Bush and Obama and world leaders, I turn to that. They have slaughtered millions of innocent civilians.
Well, right, and I mean not just through the act of warfare, but I mean through the act of choking off water supplies, through the act of
What Bill Clinton did in Iraq during his administration.
and you can look at the island nation of Haiti if you like. If you want to see a history of the absolute degradation of a civilian population, every single segment of the world, no matter how you carve it up, you can find stuff like this. It's not something that's uncommon even, you know.
No, it's not.
So I would say that the Geneva Convention is something that is useful for people to cite when they're arguing with one another, but to be honest with you, it's not something that's been followed, adhered to by virtually any
Anyone.
nation.
Especially us.
Absolutely right.
Yeah, we are one of the worst violators that we know of.
Yeah, us and Israel.
Yeah, well, that was my next point. I would say that we are second, however, to the nation state of Israel.
I
right.
disagree. I think they're second.
No, sir.
No.
We as a nation have never marched into somebody else's living quarters and pumped septic tanks into their living quarters. They are in direct violation. Palestine has no army. They have rebel groups that stand up, but they have no set army. Therefore, you cannot declare war on them. Therefore, you cannot move in there and pump anything into anywhere.
No,
exactly.
That's a good point, but I guess my counter to that would be they've also never put 2 nukes into a country.
Well, you don't need nuclear weapons to pump sewage onto civilian populations.
No, you do not. But how many people did we kill with those nukes in Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Do you know?
Relatively speaking, not that many.
Really?
No, because for 2 weeks beforehand, we dumped letters and what they called propaganda all over the streets, letting people know, look, you need to evacuate the area. Your government is a tyrant, or is tyrannical, and we are going to drop nuclear weapons. Well, they said atomic weapons, but to us, layman's terms, it is nuclear weapons. But we littered Japan for 2 weeks.
There were literally drops from airplanes. Leafleting was what they used to call it. Leafleting the cities before they were bombed.
Yes,
okay,
sir.
I did not know that.
Yes, well, you wouldn't. This is the thing, it was evil to unleash those weapons upon those populations. I don't deny that, but the way that it was done is nowhere near as vicious and unprovoked as the treatment of the Palestinian people has been. It's the numbers of dead are not even comparable at this point.
Correct. And let's not forget, Israel has everything the United States has, including the space, Star Wars. What they call it is the Iron Dome. And for those who don't understand what this means, it means if you try to fire a rocket at Israel, direct energy weapons are fired at the rocket that make it incinerate before it can ever arm itself into the population areas of Israel.
I'm back, gentlemen.
Very good. Well, we were just discussing. Well, go ahead, Dylan. Catch him up on it.
Well, we started out discussing Ukraine, but knowing us, you obviously know we got off topic. And we started talking about the Geneva Convention, and now we're on the topic of Israel and Palestine.
Yeah, violation of humanity. What is it? War crimes against humanity. Excuse me. Let me be correct when I say.
And I guess people got tired of listening to us because we have no one listening anymore.
That's all right. I'm going to share it all over the world. So.
Yeah, all our listeners got tired of us just spouting off.
Well, I'll tell you what part of the problem is, and that is that I guarantee you that we probably lost somebody right away when we brought up Israel in a negative context.
Correct.
Here is the thing that kills me, and I have never had, and I'm actually really glad that James is on for this, because this is something I noticed in the past decade and a half. The proselytizing among the Christian churches at this point, that practically demands of their flocks that any sort of criticism or opposition to the behavior of the nation state of Israel is almost considered to be a sin at this point among some of the Christian population.
That's right.
And I have no understanding of how it is that you are unchristian by not supporting a tyrannical government.
Well, I guess that means me and James aren't Christian anymore.
Well, according to some preachers, some organized churches, I guarantee you that just the simple speech that we are participating in right here and now is the type of thing that would send you to hell.
Well,
I mean,
this type of speech here is also the stuff in the U.S. that gets you put on the NSA watch list.
Well, I'm quite sure I'm already there.
If I'm not there, I have a problem.
Well, that's
many
it.
of you know.
I really don't want to know too many people that aren't on that list, so it's all right. No, go ahead, James.
Oh, no, I was going to say, as many of you know, I have been on the no-fly list for a little over a year now. If I travel, it is strictly by railway or four wheels. I am not allowed to fly because I am a potential. Now, I'm not even labeled as an enemy of the state. I am labeled as a potential enemy of the state.
Well, I'm surprised I haven't gotten there. I guess it's because I'm in a wheelchair.
Don't say that, because you know what? I'm legally blind, as I told you before. And here's the thing. I'm disallowed from having a passport or a firearm at this point legally.
Well, probably because... I don't want to say it, but probably because... You're probably not allowed to have a gun because you're blind. I mean,
no,
that's probably why
not
they're
true.
legally disallowing it.
No,
I can have a gun because I'm Canadian.
That's not true. Actually, I was allowed to have a carry license when I was younger, and my eyesight was no better. So
why are you not allowed now? Probably because you're with us.
Well, no, but that plus an FBI file was opened on me ready for this one? In 1984. It was opened on me because I had written a very long and interesting, well-thought-out letter to then President Reagan, protesting his need for the continuous nuclear proliferation. Because, in my opinion, to build weapons like this constantly and to not foresee their use and the horrors that could be unleashed upon humanity was irresponsible by his administration. I was 12 years old at the time.
Well, Chuck, if I can...
subversive file on me then.
you don't buy weapons of any kind as a nation that you don't intend to use. Even nuclear weapons have a shelf life. They have to be maintained. They have to be taken care of. You don't buy a 100 megaton bomb and not foreseeably in the future know you're going to use this.
See, that was precisely the argument that a 12-year-old Chuck Ocelli used to President Reagan in a letter. Okay?
You are my personal hero, brother.
You go. You were younger than me, and you knew what you were talking about.
Well, I didn't know much, but I did know that.
Oh, that's fine. I'm 15, and I don't know anything.
Well, don't say that.
Hey, Chris, are you with us still?
Yep.
Okay, I knew I had heard you try to get in there a couple times. If you want to speak, go ahead, brother.
No, you guys go on ahead. You guys got to a topic that I know nearly nothing about.
Well, listen, Chris, I really want to try and engage you and Dylan as much as possible because, you know, James and I are a little older. We've lived through a couple of different things. I mean, I'm older than James. I'm the oldest one on here. But, you know, we've lived through a couple of different things, and it is so important to me to try and get people that are younger than us, either one of us, to begin to think about these things on a different level, to begin to examine and think for themselves. And I'm sure James agrees with everything I'm saying right here.
Oh, absolutely, brother. Absolutely. Y'all are the ones who are going to pick up the flag when we fall.
Exactly. And it is inevitable that one day we'll be gone, and hopefully you guys will still be at it and teaching guys like yourselves more.
Hopefully, to be fair, hopefully we won't have to be. at it when you guys are gone. Hopefully, it's over by then.
You know, I'm not that optimistic, but you know.
Age does that to us, doesn't it, Chuck? We don't see the rose-colored glasses anymore.
I have the optimism.
We see the rose color as the blood that splattered on the window.
You got it.
I still have a little faith in humanity. Not much, but it's there.
Well, you know what? I hope that your faith is answered well, because you know, as I told you, I have children. James has children, and we hope that that their world is not as dark as ours.
Amen.
So, you know, and but please, Chris, I really want to bring you into the conversation. If you have anything that that has come up in your mind based on the discussion we're having here, you know, even if it's off topic, please, brother, bring it in, and we'll knock it around as best we can.
I know something that can definitely be knocked around, but it'd be knocked around in my direction. You guys were talking about how you guys are absolutely sick of the U.S. getting into business that they shouldn't be in. For example, the Ukraine crisis that's going on right now. You guys said what?
I said right, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't know how to say this without getting. Okay.
No, listen, man. Don't edit what you're saying. You know,
Okay.
Speak from your heart or speak from your mind. Either way, you know, as long as it's honest, brother, I'll accept it. Go on.
All right. Well, you guys said that you didn't like it, and I did hear the bit about how you were talking about if they're sent over there by NATO, they don't get any of the families don't get benefits if they fall. Do you guys not support any of that? Like, do you not support something that I don't want to say the States is doing because I feel like it is NATO, but do you feel like the U.S. should just completely pull out of what they're doing, or like do you think that they should still support Ukraine? Because if nobody supports Ukraine, Russia's just going to steamroll them.
Well,
so I guess they'd be starting a debate here.
I'd like to answer that if you guys are all right. I'd like to answer it first.
Sure, go ahead.
I think it's important to support them, but I also think it's important to recall our own people before we think about the benefits of other countries. We have to remember that there are people here that veterans and poor and hungry people that don't have benefits. So I think it's important to first deal with the problems on our own soil, and then if we have to, then we fight. And I think it's important to stay in NATO, but that's just me.
Anyone else?
I just got back. Admittedly, had to step away for a second, so I only caught the very last part of what you were saying there, Dylan. But I from what I understand of the conversation, I'm with you on that. I don't believe, if it was up to me, I would close my borders and take care of my people. It would take 50 years for me to get what I wanted done before I reopened my borders. Nobody would be allowed in, no foreign workers, any of that. We would fix our economy, we would fix our homeless problem, and our
Take a page out of Utah's book. Utah gave every homeless person in Utah a house.
Yeah, and all of my children would know how to read, write, and be able to count to 1 million before I ever even considered allowing anybody else's stuff, foreign trade, or any of that to come into my country.
Well, you need foreign trade to rebuild the economy.
No, I don't need foreign trade to rebuild the economy. We have steel mills, we have lead mills, we have everything we need.
You need to be able to export.
We need to feed our people. We need to get our
Correct.
people back on their feet.
I agree with that, but to be able to do that, I think you need to be able to
Yeah,
export.
but wouldn't that be easier with foreign trade?
See, now this is all debatable, and this is a matter of economics.
Right.
But the fact that James is making the point that we need to get our own house in order.
Oh, I agree with that
Before you help
point
other
entirely.
countries
Yeah,
I-
with their political problems.
even if it is a short-term sort of period of isolation in a way, to sort of put our own house in order, I think that would not be unreasonable. The fact that foreign trade is a necessity at this point, if we want to maintain, I mean, listen, we don't make iPhones, okay? We don't make computers anymore. We don't make a lot of things. So in the short run, maybe a limitation of foreign trade or a reduction or loss of foreign trade would not be out of order. But at the same time, that's not going to be allowed under any semblance of the current system, because our bank, our Federal Reserve, is not our own. It is an international conglomerate of banking interests. So basically, unless we're going to dismantle the entire system, you're correct. We're not going to be able to completely decouple ourselves from foreign trade.
Right.
But theoretically, yeah, go ahead.
Right.
Go ahead.
I wanted to just let everybody know. Yeah, I did go a little far. I get a little ranty when I get on our problems. Yes, foreign trade is a necessity, but I would not import more than I could export.
Okay, well that's fair.
Let's do it like that.
I agree with that.
Right,
But
a readjustment, a recalculation of our position in the world is entirely, appropriate at this time. We are
Yes.
not able to produce what we should be producing, but we are consuming far too much. And even as broke as our economy is, we're still consuming far too much to have a realistic equilibrium with any foreign trading entities anyway.
well, it's
So-
impossible. Like James was saying off air last time we had talked, James. You remember how you said it's impossible to fix things now? It's gotten too far.
Yeah, well, and I still truly believe that, and that's why I said 50 years. I think it would take 50 years, even in this here and now society where you want something from Indonesia and it's here in 2 days. I still think that with all these the problems are the same as they've always been. The way of dealing with them is what has changed. Instead of dealing with our problems, we sell off our problems. You deal with it, you fix it, and we sell them to foreign entities who care nothing about our people. They care about the almighty dollar, and I say that loosely, but that's what it's all about. We have got to stop depending on everybody else and start our own things. Just because we don't make computers now doesn't mean we don't possess the technology or the know-how to start our own companies to do these things.
If I wanted to, I could start a company to build computers because I'm knowledgeable about how to build them.
And with our foreign oil trade,
And Chris
The United-
actually does have that company.
well, the United States produces plenty of oil. We just don't use it. We have
That
enough
is
oil.
true.
We have enough oil to make Saudi Arabia poor. Saudi Arabia, as we are the major importers of all of these advanced plastics, crude oil, and petroleum, we have the ability, if we just said, you know what, you don't want to conform, you don't want to help us, you don't want to do this, we're not buying from you. We're opening our own oil reserves. We have 250 years worth of oil, and that was in the 80s when the last time I seen an actual study on what the United States actually possesses. And that was 250 years we could run the way we are running without ever having to buy any oil. It would make Saudi Arabia so poor that they would be giving barrels of oil away for $5 a piece just to be able to get rid of it. They would be oil poor if we stopped that kind of foreign trade. See, not all foreign trade is good trade.
Oh, I agree
Some
with
foreign
you.
trade supports heroin.
No, we had chatted about that
terrorism.
earlier.
Right, and I wasn't here for that, and I'm very
Yeah.
sorry.
No, you're fine.
But
Continue your points.
yeah, like I was saying, no, I mean, not all foreign trade is a necessity. Oil is a necessity, but when you have oil, it's not a necessity to buy it from somebody else. And
Right.
I understand what they're saying. They say, oh, well, eventually we'll be out of oil, and we'll have the oil, and then we'll be this big superpower, if you make it that long. Okay? Most societies, even the largest of large empires, make it about 700 years on average. We're not going to make it that far. But
No.
in history, you know, long as you have your army out fighting and taking things, you know, you stay pretty well. You bring your army home, and that's how Rome fell. But our foreign trade, we trade with people who support death of Christians, death of Americans, death of anybody who isn't like them. And we give that money freely when we have the proper tools to utilize our own natural resources and not be dependent. Just my thoughts.
No, and your mention of plastic is something that's you know, universally ignored by most. The idea that petroleum is also necessary for the production of those types of things. I mean, if we simply became the plastic producers of the world, we could fix our economic problems right quick. You know, not only that, but I mean, just allowing other textiles to be produced, like hemp.
Yes, Tennessee just did that, brother. Tennessee just did it on the 14th. We are now a hemp-growing state.
Yes, they did, and I was just going to mention that. You know, we have a few states, and Tennessee is the latest one to actually legalize the cultivation of hemp. And as this begins to shift, we should see some changes. But the problem is that that corruption leaks into all of these, you know, sort of mechanisms by which we could recover our economy, by which we could recover the strength of our population.
And even if we recover the strength of the economy, are we really ever going to be rebuilt as a country? Aren't we pretty much scarred by what happened?
But listen, all empires, and I will categorize this right now, I do believe that the American state as it is an empire. All empires do have the ability to recover themselves. The problem is that, as James just stated very eloquently a minute ago, is that generally speaking they fall, but they usually make some very tragic errors. And we are watching a lot of those tragic errors now, quite early in our evolution, realistically, because we should have lasted at least 500 years from where we started. You know, but what's gone on so far?
I think I'll see the collapse in my lifetime.
It does appear that way because we've become decoupled from our own interests. You know, the fascinating fact about, you know, exporting our own problems here is something that has also, you know, become extremely prevalent. I mean, if you just think about the fact that we had the, you know, the mortgage bubble and the property problems in 2008, what did we do with those toxic assets?
We continued the same problems that caused it.
Well, right,
and increased it.
Exported, divided, and convoluted the entire problem, which is what we do with just about everything, it seems, is send it somewhere else. And now there is a revolving numerical overwhelming amount of debt, which is basically revolving around the world, and eventually it's got to land somewhere.
But you know? Can I ask another question?
Of course.
Do you think the world will let that happen? Because a collapse of us will be a collapse of everything.
Well, it is happening.
But do you think even enemies, or supposed enemies like Russia, who trade on our currency, will let a collapse happen here?
Well, they are right now decoupling themselves from that. They're divesting. Even China is slowly divesting of their interest in our country. Believe me, they're getting ready for where we're going to have a serious hiccup, if not a collapse. Okay, this is something that is just it's happening right in front of your eyes.
Oh, I know it's happening, but do you think they'll let it get to the final stages?
Well, you know, the reasons often given for why they won't allow this to happen is the petrodollar. Okay, the fact that oil concerns are traded in dollars, and dollars are necessary to make other economies run. Well, over time, we're watching them position themselves so that they don't require the American dollar anymore. Okay, so we are seeing them sort of take steps back and try to protect themselves. But another relevant fact here is that, you know, can you name me a single nation state on the planet that is not in some ridiculous amount of debt at this point.
Mm,
Essentially, the entire planet is broke.
Oh, yes. And let's
China.
not forget, ladies and gentlemen, that the debt is all imaginary. You only owe this interest because somebody says you owe it.
And that's not just true in the United States, that's true everywhere.
Yes.
We're all trading on this debt and compiling it and letting it grow and letting it grow. And, every once in a while, some of it gets cashed in and you watch entire economies collapse. Eventually it will be our turn. And it doesn't matter about the dependence on other nations with us and everything else. I mean, if you step back even 20 years, you'll see that the players are all different when it comes to the major world concerns. So, every half a generation or so, this stuff just, they play a game of musical chairs.
Do you guys all want to do another show like this tomorrow? Because I'm going to have to start getting ready to head out. I'm going to finally get something to eat. I haven't eaten all day.
Me neither.
So I'm probably going to try to get something to eat. If you guys want to do this again tomorrow, I'd be happy to. This is great.
I don't know about me. I don't really have any points to make ever.
Well, you're learning. Look, I guessed it on a few different shows before I really knew anything, and all I did was exactly what you're doing, and now I'm hosting shows. So you'll get there eventually.
Well, I don't know what my schedule is going to be like tomorrow. I know that that tonight I'm going to be talking to Scott Enyard, who was at the RFK assassination scene.
I thought it was Bobby Kennedy.
RFK.
Oh, you're right.
Robert Francis Kennedy, RFK.
Okay.
I know I sometimes mumble a little, so it might have sounded like I said JFK again, but yeah, I'm going to be talking to him tonight, and I'm not sure exactly where that's all going to go because he was kind of a pain in the neck interview to get.
Don't want to say that on air.
No, it's okay. He really didn't want to talk to anybody because he was harassed for over a decade by the LAPD over the fact that he had been the only photographer shooting pictures in the pantry when the shots were fired. So.
And James, are you doing your roundtable tonight?
The first hour at it's 11 p.m. Eastern Time. I am going to take anybody who wants to come in and talk about current events. The second hour we will be with the founder of Open Carry Texas, and he is going to tell us about the rally, the meet and greet that he is hosting in Texas, in West Texas, on June 21st. And all people are invited to come. It is good to learn about these things. There's an event page up. If you haven't been invited, drop me a line. I will make sure that you get your invite.
Also, off topic, has anyone heard anything about American Spring? Or did it just die?
I heard nothing, which means it probably did pretty well.
Yeah, well, my understanding is that there's people there today.
I've only heard there are people there. I haven't heard anything good or anything bad. Unlike the trucker rally in October, where I heard good things, and there were constantly updates. I haven't heard any updates about this.
See, I'm only a little bit hesitant to really to get behind this kind of thing or to get too much invested into it because of some of the people that are in support of it. I don't exactly trust them, and even though they are alternative type media people, and I will call them alternative media, even though I'm part of the new media, there's something a little bit off here, and I'm not sure what's going on, so yeah. I reserve judgment on it first.
I like new media. I prefer that to alternative because we are the new.
Oh yeah, but Jones Corp is definitely alternative media. Sorry, I just had to spit that one out.
Yeah, it's fine. I tend to agree.
Anyways, so are we going to add anything else, or are we going to pretty much close this out?
I think we're good. Chris, do you have anything you want to say before we stop the broadcast?
No, not really. But we should talk about something Canadian. No, I'm just joking. Yeah, no, I have nothing to add.
Well, Canada doesn't have anything big going on right now. Otherwise, we would.
Mayor Ford. And we're now taking part in operations over in Ukraine, but that's about it.
You are.
See, I love Ford. I got to tell you, because at least he is out front about the fact that he's smoking crack and going crazy. Unlike most of our politicians who keep that kind of stuff hidden.
They don't hide it very well.
Honestly, I don't know what it is, but he, like, other than the fact of the drugs that he is, used, he's been one of the best mayors Toronto's ever had. He saves money everywhere he can. He drives his own car to work. He doesn't have somebody drive him.
Well, he definitely has the motivation to pay attention more than the average politician, right?
True that.
Next time, if Canada has any news going, we'll talk about that. But I didn't know that we're doing stuff in Ukraine. Doesn't surprise me.
I didn't know, like, 3/4 of the stuff that you guys talked about for the States. See, this doesn't really work.
Yeah, maybe next time I can get Voids in here.
Maybe.
He doesn't care too much, but maybe next time.
Well, this was a long 3.5-hour talk.
And it went by really quick for me.
I talked about 5 minutes.
Hey,
And we'll still at some point do those other JFK shows, though, and you just let me know when.
yeah, we can do those. Can we do those like every Friday?
I can't guarantee it, but I should be able to do it.
All right, that sounds good.
I didn't know about that because from what I caught on yesterday, it sounded pretty good. I want to keep listening to that.
That's one thing I've got no shortage of information on, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I've noticed from your nickname.
Yeah. And you can find me on YouTube doing that stuff. What videos they have allowed to stay up, by the way. But,
Yeah, I actually I found one of them. I didn't watch it, but I found it.
I'm
Yeah,
surprised they let you keep anything up.
Yeah, well, they seriously redacted my channel, and I left it there. You can see there's a bunch of deleted, removed videos. Because I was kind of no holds barred about a few things, and then there was other issues too. But they took down some of it, but they left up some pretty decent stuff of mine. So, I'll keep pointing people to it until the channel's empty.
That person that you were talking about, I don't know, 10 minutes ago, is that person going to be on your show later?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, if you want to find that, it's at ucy.tv /TOE, which stands for the Ocelli Effect, and I'll be on at 8 p.m. Eastern. 8 to 10, actually. So I'll actually have time to catch James' show at 11.
And eventually we will have an actual...
That's cool. Well, do you have a link to James' show?
James' show, you could... do you have a Facebook account?
Yeah.
Easiest way to find it is enter NWO Truth Radio. If you were on my friends list, actually, you know what, Dylan, you could probably just drop them the NWO group page, right?
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, why don't you do that? Because that's the easiest way, and if you kind of explore a couple of the other people posting on there, you can check out their shows too.
All right, Chris.
My network has about 30 hosts on it, but I'm only friendly with a couple of them, so.
All right, James dropped out, I guess.
He's been gone for a long time.
All right, so thanks for stopping in and staying for 3.5 hours. I didn't think we'd go this long. I thought.
No, me neither. And you should close out by again identifying your show and everything else, Dylan.
Oh yeah, good point. Help me out here.
This has been as many topics as you can put into one podcast for a day. Brought to you by
the Truth Speaks
Dylan.
Network.
Yeah,
on
Chris.
YouTube, and eventually we will have a. I'm sorry to cut you off. I do that a lot.
And Chuck.
And Chuck. Hopefully next time hopefully we have an official time set up eventually. Until then, we'll just be doing these shows at random.
Yeah, and possibly a set topic.
Yeah, maybe a set topic, but those are no fun.
And no guarantees on
No, our mind's running a mile a minute, so it's
Yeah.
unlikely.
We could talk about like Mayor Ford and end up talking about bath salts and zombies. I don't know.
All right, guys.
All
Take
right.
care.
You too. Thanks for stopping in.
No problem.
Bye.